All right, good evening. It is 7:01 p.m. on Thursday, March 14th. I'm calling the Lunenburg Finance Committee meeting to order. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access channel and on Facebook Live on the Public Access Facebook page. The following information is provided for members of the public that would like to participate in the meeting remotely. To participate remotely, you can find the agenda posted on the town website. From a computer, use the link attached there. From a telephone, dial the toll-free number 888-475-4499. Enter webinar ID 892-2688-7485. This agenda lists all topics which may be discussed at the meeting and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by open meeting law. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any announcements from the committee this evening? Excellent, hearing none. Is there any public comment from the public this evening? In Zoom as well. All right, any public comment from the committee this evening? Fantastic. It's like the old days. Exactly. Do we have a town manager report?
Evening, everyone.
Morning.
Happy pre-St. Patrick's Day for those of us in green.
And Pi Day, yeah.
So a couple updates that I gave to the board the other night. We have a couple RFP and IFBs out. The request for qualifications for a OPM, Owner's Project Manager for Marshall Park. Those proposals came in this week on Wednesday. So they need to be reviewed first to make sure they meet all the minimum qualifications. And then there'll be a process for the Parks Commission to come in and have them be interviewed and rate those firms. The invitation for bids for Flat Hill Culvert Project, those are due on March 27th, and the bids for the cleaning services for the town buildings are due April 4th. And the DPW director last week indicated the bids for road maintenance came in. They came in under the office estimate, which is about $127,000 under the office estimate. So that was a good results for that bid, and that was awarded to PJ Keating.
Was that his $700 and something thousand estimate?
I believe the actual contract total for 1 year was around $634,000.
Okay. And they were 100 and something under that?
Yes. No, the contract, so it would be $127,000 more than that was the office estimate. So the end result was around $634,000.
Okay.
And I emailed the finance committee, the school committee, the select board, the assessors, everyone about new growth, and that certificate, it was approved at the $630,220, and the Money Tech assessment figure came in the same as my preliminary budget, so that's unchanging, and the overlay is not going to change as per a vote from the assessors. So all the additional new growth will be added to the school's budget, and that was $236,025.50.
Does that include the slight discrepancy with the $5,000 from the Board of Assessors that was $2,500?
That's part of what I just referenced. The overlay number is not going to change from the 120 that's in the budget right now.
Got it. Okay. So even though they voted on the $2,500 difference.
Correct. They decided to keep the overlay number the same, and it will be absorbed into what they already have in the entire overlay account.
Okay.
And that's all for now.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have a finance director report this evening.
Hi everyone, I currently do not have a report. I did get an email from Chris regarding the capital projects, or we did that, not capital projects, the Chapter 90 funds. So I will get that to you for the next week. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving right on to new business. We have the fire department's presentation for this evening. I don't think so. I think I just sent it over email. I can move it in right now real quick. I'm just looking
Good
for
evening.
it.
You said you had the slides?
I do.
Okay.
I do. I emailed them to everyone, but I didn't put them in our drive yet. Of course, now I can't find where I put them. There it is. Okay, we are good to go.
Okay. All right. Good evening. My name's Pat Sullivan. I'm the fire chief, for those of you that don't know me, some of you familiar faces. A little bit about the fire department, if you can go to the next slide. The department consists of myself, full-time administrative assistant, 3 career fire officers, 6, I'm proud to say, firefighter paramedics, now 5 career officers, and nominally 27 to 30 on-call firefighters, EMTs, and paramedics. Next slide. That personnel covers the department 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have 3 firefighter EMTs or paramedics on duty Monday through Saturday. That's the career staff. Sunday is 3 per diem firefighter EMTs or paramedics, plus an on-call duty officer. And that personnel are supplemented on most calls by the on-call force, and which is the off-duty career people coming in and call back, and the call personnel. Most calls with 3 people on duty, that can handle an ambulance call or a small fire call, but most of our work is manpower intensive, and it requires a lot more assistance, so they're coming in on a regular basis. Next slide. For equipment, we operate 3 pumpers or engines, one of which doubles as our heavy rescue unit, carries the Jaws of Life, airbags, heavy-duty rescue equipment. 1 ladder truck, 2 brush or forestry units, a water rescue unit, 2 ambulances that are now licensed at the ALS level, and 3 support vehicles. And again, next slide. Our duties, we're an all-hazards response agency. Other than law enforcement, usually we're involved in fire, EMS, hazardous materials, technical rescue, plus administrative support, training, public education and prevention, which is a big part of the job too. Next slide. Just to give you a kind of a rough breakdown on our calls, in 2023, we responded to a total of 2,033 incidents. 1,667 of those were calls, basically emergency calls, responses. That's in the emergency calls, it's about a 7% increase over last year, and a good chunk of that is in EMS, which you'll see later on. We're getting much busier there. And again, just a quick show of what our responses have been. I'm sorry, next slide. I'm used to hitting the button here. Just showing a 10-year of how our responses have gone. They stayed fairly steady until 2021. Now we've started seeing a significant uptick, especially in EMS responses. Next slide. And just kind of give you an idea, I've included this slide for many years. There's always a question of, what does the new growth do to the town? What do these big developments do to this town? I've been tracking our call volume out of the large planned developments, whether they be the multifamilies like Tri-Town, Rogers Way, Arrive, or some of the smaller multi-housing or multi-house developments. And what you can see in the slide is we see a significant increase pretty much every year in EMS calls. The lion's share of that is out of the multifamilies. Some of the other ones do make a bit of an impact on it, but it's really that. But the last few years, we've seen a definite impact on how many EMS calls we're doing. So, next slide. So just a little on the current budget in '23. Currently, salaries, we're on target. Expense is generally on target. We found we were running over in EMS supplies as we were running our first year at the paramedic level. Our initial estimates on what we were going to be spending on supplies was under what we planned. We're covering it out of other lines in the budget, making it work right now. As we'll talk about later on in the budget, that should be pretty well funded in the next year's budget. Next slide. So the proposed budget for 2025, it's generally a level service budget. It's an overall 2.21% increase from last year. The increases in salary are contractual. It provides us 100% paramedic coverage that we've been working up to since last year. The above target requests based on the town manager's target budget were requests for increases in EMS supplies, IT-related software and hardware, and radio maintenance. I'll touch on each one of those. So again, on salary lines, this just is an indication of where we're at. Our overtime hasn't changed. We've stayed within that. The call firefighter and EMT salaries has stayed the same. The career salaries bumped up from contractual raises. We had a change last year with the retirement of a senior officer. That officer position was replaced with a firefighter paramedic, so there was some adjustment there. It was somewhat of a savings. Just a little bit on the paramedic training and the paramedic service. Next slide. Just to give you an idea and a timeline on where we were at, this has been about a 6-year project that we've been working on this to develop the paramedic service, get the staffing. We got the license last year in January. Initially, we started out part-time because there's a training requirement that any brand-new paramedic has to train with a more senior paramedic for at least 50 advanced life support calls before they can work with a basic EMT, basically work on their own. We didn't have too many of those paramedics because a lot of our people are new, so we had to work out training with other departments. But in January, we got our 4th person certified. March, we were able to hire a paramedic as a retirement replacement. He was able to work on his own right out of the gate. By July, we were operating 80 to 85% of the time at the paramedic level. Our 6th career member was certified in October, and she completed her ride-along training in February. So we're anticipating next month we will be 100% paramedic all the time. There will be a paramedic on duty 24/7. So again, next slide. As I mentioned, there was a training requirement, so it took us a little while to get up to speed. And again, by April, we'll be 24/7. How does that affect income? And again, on the next slide, we can bill at a higher rate for paramedic service. Again, the billing is where what we provide for care, not where. There was somewhat of an increase, not as much as I honestly expected to see, but again, half the year we weren't running at the full paramedic level. I honestly anticipate we'll see more of a revenue increase in '24 and even more in '25 because we'll be running it more and more. The savings in the third service ALS, we have a revolving account. Previously, we had to, if we needed paramedics, we would have private service in the area come in, one of the other municipal services that had that, and we were paying out on that. That, we saw close to $37,000 savings in that because we're doing it ourselves. I expect in FY '24, '25, that's going to go down even more in that because we'll be doing it ourselves.
When you say the billing is increased at this point, is that lending our paramedics out to other areas in the same way?
There's always that possibility. We have seen an increase in ALS, a request for ALS transport, because the whole region has seen they're seeing the same kind of call volume increases that we have seen. Private service is suffering from manpower problems, and it's fallen back in the municipal services. So on certain days, you may see a Lunenburg ambulance in Fitchburg, a Leominster truck coming to Lunenburg. We're all over the place. Okay. There is ALS Intercept, where we would meet somebody else's BLS ambulance, and our medics would ride in, and we would bill for that, just like they used to bill us. Last year, we had 6 of those. So we don't really see it's going to be that big of an impact. We think it's going to be more ALS transport out of town, which you bill for everything then. So, and there's been discussions with the town manager about raising the rates. We haven't raised the rates in a long time. Put it off last year because of some of the financial challenges around town. We'll be talking about that again this year. I guess the point to get across with that is that affects private insurance. We can bill more there. A lot of people are Medicare, Medicaid, Mass Health. We have to take what they assign for that, which is pennies on the dollar compared to like a private insurance. Which on the flip side is good for elderly residents, low-income residents that are on that. They're not getting hit that hard. But where about 64% of our calls are that, increasing the rates it's not the huge panacea that everybody would think it would be. But again, we haven't gone up in quite some time, so we will be looking at that.
Could you go into a little more detail as to what the rates are and where they're used and?
I don't have the exact numbers right in the top of my head in front of me, but there's a rate for if you transport at a basic life support level, a rate if you transport at an advanced life support level with minimal skills, and then a higher rate if it's a much more serious call, that you're doing a cardiac monitor, you're doing IVs, doing multiple medications, there's a higher rate for that. There's a different rate for mileage. And you can bill individually for a lot of small ancillary things. We've kind of all lumped that all into one thing.
And this is billed to the insurance companies
Goes
directly?
to the insurance companies.
Okay. How quickly do they actually pay back?
Sometimes it takes quite a while. It all depends. So it depends on the company.
How does the billing come back into the town, like into what?
It comes back into the general fund.
Into the general fund?
Correct. We have one revolving account, like we said, that we use for paying the third service ALS companies that were coming in and to cover the expense of our billing company for EMS billing. But other than that, it goes right back to the general fund. All right, next slide. Sorry. Oh, next slide.
It's there.
Oh, okay.
That's just what's on
Looking out of
TV.
the corner of my
It's
eye
slower.
over there.
That one's always like 7 seconds slower too.
Okay. For our above target requests in the budget was EMS supplies. We requested an additional $7,000 in that line. When we originally did our calculations out, figuring what we thought we were going to need for EMS supplies, this covers, a lot of this is ALS because it's covering medications, covering advanced equipment. Some of those numbers were based several years ago. As you're probably all well aware, inflation has hit hard, and no more so than in medications and some of that stuff. So those numbers went up a lot. The other thing we found was having our own paramedics on every call. They're taking people in at the ALS level. They're doing a cardiac monitor. They may be giving them medication for nausea. While before, you might not have had that out-of-town truck coming in. So we're doing more calls using more equipment that way. So that's been addressed, and it is in the current town manager's proposed budget.
Chief, have you been able to manage shelf life on the supplies?
Sometimes.
Without having...
Sometimes. Some of the medication is tough because it's very expensive and you don't always use it. But when you need it, you need it. So yeah, there is some wastage, unfortunately. We have a machine that keeps it climate controlled, keeps track of accountability, keeps track of inventory. But yeah, you do run into that. Because some of it's got a long shelf life, some of it doesn't.
Do you have that under a contract service?
We pay a fee for a yearly maintenance contract on it, but the machine is in our station. We stock it ourselves.
Okay.
Our people stock it, but it's designed so, like, I can't walk in there and put a code in and take something I'm not supposed to out of there. So only certain people can take certain things out of it. But there is a maintenance contract to maintain.
It was kind of a facetious question
Yeah.
because managing shelf life on stuff is very difficult.
That is a problem.
Thank you.
Next slide. Also an expense that was above target was our IT software. There's several software systems that we use that are proprietary to the fire department. They're either cloud-based that we're paying an annual fee for. their support for some of the equipment, like the med vault. Last year, as soon as we started into the budget year, we got hit with an increase. And on one of them, we told there's going to be an increase the next few years. So we're trying to budget that in a little bit and also kind of keep a little bit of a cushion in case we get hit with another unanticipated increase. Because unfortunately, some of these companies, they don't always warn you on your budget cycle as to what's happening with it. So we're trying to put that in there just to be ready for it in case it happens. We did change software, so there is a little bit of a decrease in cost on one thing, but there was a little other increase on a different software that we didn't know about until we got into it. And again, that is also funded in the town manager's preliminary budget. The next slide is radio maintenance capital. I had requested $10,000 increase on that. That line has not gone up in probably 10 to 15 years. And as you're probably all well aware, stuff's gone up considerably in that time frame. The plan was to start trying to replace some of our radios. We applied for an Assistance to Firefighters grant, a federal grant last year. We weren't able to get it. The police were able to get a grant to replace their radios. DPW did theirs on capital. We were trying to avoid doing it on capital. We were denied the grant. Next slide. My concern is nowadays these radios are microprocessor controlled. For the heavier duty public safety grade radios, they run anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 a unit. And again, like some of the old radios we had, these things lasted 20 years. These things are computers. They have about a 10 to 15 year lifespan. So my goal was, with that money in the budget, that I could start replacing a few units a year. So instead of making a big capital purchase and in 10 years I'm coming knocking on your, well, it won't be me knocking on your door, but somebody saying we need to replace $100,000+ worth of radios again, I wanted to try to phase it in like the turnout gear that we did. Right now, that's not currently funded. We'll figure something out.
Are we looking at roughly 20-ish radios total?
If with the increase, it would be about 4 or 5 radios a year. We're looking at probably about 40+
40+,
radios.
okay.
Because this would just be portable. The idea is everybody has a radio. If there's an emergency on the fire ground or somewhere, they've got a radio that they can communicate with.
Okay.
And yes, they do make $300 or $400 specials, but they're not something you want to use on a fire ground. Though these ones, you know, they're waterproof. They're a little more armored. They're designed to work with a glove on, you know. And I say 3,000 to 5,000. If you buy the top end, they're 8 or 9. That's not even what we were looking at. So, to move along, just touch on capital. For capital plan for FY24, the replacement of Rescue 1 is still underway. It was on the ARPA money. I asked the other day when I had made contact with the salesman if they had any more of a date, and other than early 2025, they can't give me a date. They don't even see a VIN number for the chassis yet for it. And it takes about 4 months to build the truck once they have the chassis. And they don't even know when they're getting a chassis. Last year I was told July, and that was before the strike. So that's coming someday. We're still working on the phase 1 of the radio infrastructure replacement. We're working with the vendor on that to get the equipment. So trying to move along on that. Capital for FY25, the only thing we have on capital is replacement, or the phase 2 of the replacement of the radio equipment. That would replace the antennas, some of the microwave equipment, an additional simulcast site, get some other work done with it to improve the cabinetry that it's in so we don't have the mice moving into them all the time. The mice enjoy the heat in there, unfortunately. And again, this is police and fire, not just us. It covers both public safety departments. And on the next slide, just to basically give you a quick idea of what this will do in an improvement, the green areas on there are optimal radio coverage within the town of Lunenburg. The areas that are blue doesn't mean that we can't communicate. It just may be the signal's not as good. A portable radio may have trouble getting out. Not completely optimal. When the system is completely upgraded after the update, you see the increase in the green area. That's what they project, that we'll have much better coverage in that. So, moving along on that, hopefully. Just to touch on some other funding sources that the department sees. Again, this year we've got another $6 safety equipment grant from the state. This is year 4 of a 5-year plan that they were providing money from the state out to fire departments for equipment. This is where when we've had to move some money to cover EMS supplies, this is filling in the gap. Last year, this grant, we were able to replace several hundred feet of hose, some nozzles and other equipment. This year, it's a replacement of some 20-plus-year-old power saws that aren't working so well anymore, and starting our replacement of portable radios. EMPG grant, Emergency Management Preparedness Grant, is one that we get. It's federal money, but it's through the state. Every year, we usually see around $3,700. Sometimes it varies a little bit. This year, we were able to replace a couple of 20, 25-year-old cold water rescue suits that leak pretty badly, and some equipment to go along with our inflatable rescue sled that we can use for ice rescue. It can be able to be used, towed behind a snowmobile or an ATV on snow. That can be used as a sled to move somebody injured or something like that. Just gives us a little bit more flexibility. Another grant that we see is SAFE, Student Awareness of Fire Education and Senior Safe. Again, this is money that we get from the state every year. This is for safety and fire safety education in the schools, grades K through 3. We have several instructors that are trained to go in there, deliver a curriculum, teach fire safety. This program has been around since the early 2000s, and the state has seen a significant drop in child injuries and fire deaths from it. So it's certainly a worthwhile program. The other part of that is a senior safe. That's targeted at the other end for our older residents. We do some safety training, do presentations in conjunction with the Eagle House. It also helps fund our smoke detector project, that we can buy smoke detectors, and we encounter older people in town that don't have any smoke detectors, or they have obsolete ones in their homes. We can replace them for nothing, put them in. One of our firefighters will go out and put them up for them. And we've found a lot of people that don't have them, or they have one that when you look at it, it dated from 1976 and probably hasn't had a battery since 1985, but it's still there. But unfortunately, this is the last fire fatality we had, and there was no smoke detectors in the home. So it's certainly an issue out there. And that's also in conjunction with the Sand for Seniors project that we do with the senior center, that if they need sand for their walkway, they're over 65 or disabled, we go out, provide the sand, and the same thing, we can do a quick safety inspection. If they need smoke detectors, we can replace it for them.
Are those carbon monoxide as well?
Yes, we can if they don't have them, because those are necessary too. The only thing we really can't replace is electric ones, but battery ones we can do. So again, impact is of the budget as recommended. It's a level service budget. It's maintaining our current operations, maintaining paramedic level service. Most of the department's above target requests are in the town manager's preliminary budget. It funds our IT software needs. It funds our EMS supply needs. At this time, it doesn't cover the radio maintenance needs. Then the last slide, I've just got a few things I'll mention that aren't in the budget. They're not in the budget right now, but I just kind of want to throw out things that may be coming down the pike in a few years right now. Again, we didn't come in asking for staffing. We've built up a 5-year plan. We kind of gotten to a plateau, but it doesn't mean we won't be knocking on your door about staffing some days. Things that we're seeing, we're slowly bleeding out call people faster than we're getting them. Last year, we only had 1 application. Currently, I have 3, but 2 don't even live in town, but I need to look at them to be able to cover per diem shifts. 2 of our most active call firefighters within 5 years, will be retiring because you have to stop being a firefighter at 65. We will have 2 of our most senior career firefighters most likely retiring within 5 years. Plenty of talent to move up and fill those spots, but it's coming in from the bottom. You know, we're going to be needing more people, and we need to think, look at that of if we don't have the call people, are we going to need more staffing? And I'm singing the same chorus that you probably heard from other departments. Our schedule and our pay isn't 100% competitive, especially when you're looking at firefighter medics. Those people are like gold out there right now. The last time we hired, we had 2 paramedics nibble, but they couldn't take the pay cut. So we've paid to train our own people, which is great, and I just hope they stay around. The other thing is we're slowly dwindling out of the call department of young people that want to be full-time firefighters. a lot of them, they do still have those people, but they get hired somewhere else before we have an opening and that. That's my song and dance on staffing, but we will be looking at, there's going to be, we'll need something within a few more years. Looking further out on equipment, like I said, I thought Mr. Passios was looking over my shoulder somewhere along the way. We currently spec the ambulances, plan them on a 10-year life cycle. I think with the call volume we're seeing and the increases in the call volume, right now we're probably going to be retiring ambulances at well over 100,000 miles. We used to retire trucks 15, 20 years ago at 10 years with 40,000 miles on them. We're seeing a lot more mileage. I think you're going to see the life cycle of these trucks is going to drop from 10 to 8 years. And there's probably going to be a discussion at some point about a third ambulance, not to staff, but to have a mechanical spare available. So if one of the other trucks is out of service, we still have 2 ambulances. Not going to be next year that I'm knocking on anybody's door about that, but these are some things that you may see coming down the road in a few more years, because we're just getting that much busier.
Is that in the 10-year capital plan?
Not yet. I brought it up at capital planning, and it was the same thing. I don't have numbers, I don't have anything in place in there, but it's things to throw out that this could be coming along. It could be 10 years down the road, but
It would probably be good to plug it in there at the time so that we,
my look as we go further out 10 or 15 years, this new replacement ambulance is coming, I'm gonna plan that on an 8-year cycle, not a 10. And probably start looking at it from there. And right now we're looking, I wanna see how many times both ambulances are on the road. How often that we're down to 1 ambulance and we're having to call out of town. We've been tracking that since last August, and that internally to see where we're at. And that's also the question of, again, having staffing. How many times do we not have the people to staff the second ambulance? Well, if we had 4 people in the station versus 3, under normal circumstances, you could staff both ambulances. It's something to consider. So, and I mentioned, because I have so many people that tell me, oh, that the station is brand new. People don't remember that station is 20 years old in this December when we moved in. And that building, facilities is doing a lot of work on it. They're fixing a lot of things, but it's a 20-year-old building and it's aging. We are maxed out on space, and again, not going to be my problem, but it's going to be probably 10 or 15 years down the road, but you're going to be looking, there's going to be discussion about space issues. With the way the town grows, is it going to be a substation? Is it going to be additional space there? Because that lot has no more room on it. Unfortunately, when it was built to accommodate that building, and that's it. And these are things, like I said, I don't have an answer for them right now, but it's something to think about in the future, that it could be coming along. So, and that's all I have.
Thank you, Chief. Open up to the committee
Anyone
for
has any
questions.
questions?
Chief, I've got one, and I think I know the answer to it in general. But now that you've gone through the staffing plan and you're coming up on your full expected staffing and so on, do you see any opportunities in the near future to try to start mitigating a little bit of the overtime? And I understand that, training never goes away, recertification never goes away.
In fact, it's increased now.
Yeah. So is that pretty much going to keep it status quo
It's-
versus opportunities to maybe eliminate some of the overtime where you've...
The only way you end up eliminating, right now, some of it, if a career person's out, if none of the career people want it, we can fill it with a per diem if they're available, which is obviously a cost savings. So we save some money there. On the flip side, if we don't have a per diem on the weekends, we may have to use a career person at overtime to fill that. So it's balancing out. We've been staying in there. To be able to save on some overtime, you've got to have enough staffing that you can actually drop down a couple people, and at 3 people, we're really not there. My old department I worked, we had a 5-man shift and we didn't drop. I'll give you an example. Leominster has 19 guys and they can't drop anymore because they staffed up their second ambulance.
But by the way, I wanted to bring up, and I guess this is my opportunity to do it. There was and I'm hoping you saw it, there was a picture posted on Facebook recently. There were 4 members of the fire department. That was 70s, wasn't it?
That was 1984.
Oh, was that late?
Yep.
Okay, 1984. I served with all those people that were in that picture.
If it's the same picture I'm thinking of.
Right, and one of them was our chief, and the then chief's son, who was also a chief up in
Hampshire?
Guilford, New Hampshire.
Yep.
And two other members of the department, so.
Michael just retired as a captain out of the Guilford Fire Department
Right,
after
so.
30 years.
Of the 4 people in that picture, 3 of them went on to full-time careers, and we've had many, many members of this department go on to full-time careers in the fire service in various capacities. And I congratulate everybody since I got off the department, you know, the training of our staff, most of it done in-house over the years, has brought people forward that people have been reaching out to for full-time careers as they grow through the department. I guess I'll leave it at that. But it was fun to see that picture in the comments
Yeah,
back.
that
and
was
forth.
1980, that was a 1984 yearbook picture for Stephen, Michael, and Chris Fullers.
Yep.
I wanted to make a comment, it really isn't a question, but I think this is a very thoughtful presentation, and it's clear that you're thinking about all different angles of relevancy, you know, adding a fire truck or, you know, another ambulance down the road, and how that's going to save on expenses in the long run from not having to outsource to different municipality. So, and I see a lot of great benefit to what you were saying earlier with the fire safety education awareness, not just for the kids, but, you know, for the elderly. So thank you for your service and
Thank
your
you.
entire team service as well.
I'd like to have people around me that are a lot smarter than I am. I have a great group of people.
Any other questions for the chief?
No, I don't have any questions, thank you.
I've got one more note that I had written down here that I forgot to ask. With the federal infrastructure bills and recovery funding, so on and so forth from the federal government, have you gotten anything through the grapevine that there might be additional opportunities for money to apply for in the next couple of years?
I haven't heard the latest on whether they were going to refund the AFG grant, which is the big ones for the fire service are assistance to firefighters, the SAFER grant, which is staffing, which is a whole nother discussion, and then there's a lesser one out there for fire safety education type stuff. Whether the feds keep funding those or not, they have been right along, but this day and age, I'm not sure. I haven't seen much other stuff. There's a lot of different grants that are coming out, but a lot of them don't directly apply to us. You know, if I see them, I try to fund them off to, or send them off to the proper departments. We do a pretty good job. I just got one about getting rid of PFAS foam from the DPW superintendent the other day. Unfortunately, we got rid of all of the old stuff a long time ago. But the new stuff, now they say is bad too, but they won't take that. We're from the government, we're here to help.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
At this point, are we fully up and running to support 12,000 residents as you see it? I know you mentioned we're kind of, we finished the 5-year plan, but are we at a point now where we are comfortable?
We're still, it's a balancing act. We are still getting call people turning out. We're still covering a lot of the calls. When we have a second call, if the ambulance goes out, the call people will come back, cover the station. We don't drop a lot of calls and have to call out of town, but a lot of it's a juggling act as to who's around. We have less and less call people that live in town because they can't afford it, unfortunately. What I'm seeing more and more again is people coming in that this is their foot in the door to become a firefighter or a paramedic. And we train them, we work with them, and then unfortunately, fortunately for them, usually in 3 to 5 years, they're getting hired somewhere. Unfortunately, not often us. And then they may stay on part-time, but we may not see them as much. Right now, out of a 40-some-odd man department, I believe I have 6 that are true call firefighters, that have another job, that do something else, and they don't want to be a full-timer, they're just a call firefighter. And as I said, 2 of them are over 60. And actually 2 are well over 60 and are EMT onlys at this point. It's a different demographic coming in. So that's why I say, are we good right now? Yes. Looking forward, we're still going to need to think about something else. We're going to need to look at another 5-year plan or something to cover It's getting a little more difficult to cover the per diem shifts because most of those per diems are career firefighters somewhere else. They can work for us for $27 an hour or work overtime for their own department at $40 or $50 an hour or more, and that it's tough to make a decision. The shifts right now are on Sundays. A lot of guys, it's getting harder to give up Sundays all the time. So we see that, and I see that coming down the road. We're trying to get some new people in and cover that, but I think it's going to be, I think what you're going to see is it's going to be less and less call people as time goes on, and we're not, as like, same problem the police have. We're not drawing the new generation in. You can talk it up, but there's not as many people that want to get into this line of work anymore. That seems to have all changed since 2020. So the ones we see are usually people that are in, they have family in the business. So.
Okay. With the inspections decreasing and fire kind of plateauing over the last decade or so, and EMS just skyrocketing, are we getting to the point where we may need a third ambulance?
Well, as I mentioned, I don't think to staff a third ambulance we're there yet, but I think within a 5 to 10 year range, you may be talking about having a third one, as they call it, the terms a mechanical spare. The truck wouldn't be in service normally, but if one of the other trucks broke down, I had to go in for maintenance, you move the equipment over, put that truck in service, and now you're still running 2 trucks.
Okay, but we're not at the call volume where we'd need a third truck yet.
We don't hit it that often that we get that busy, but just the other day we had to, because both ambulances were on other calls, and I took the ladder truck to a call by myself and met a couple guys on the scene, and we had to wait for a private.
Okay.
So, which wasn't a long wait, but some days that's how it goes. And like we said, the whole area is busier, it's not just us. I think they're all seeing equivalent percentages increases. The cities are busier, the other towns are busier, and we're all starting to travel further and further because people are living longer with more complex medical problems that can't be taken care of at the local hospitals. So we're making more trips to Worcester. We've had a couple that we've had to go to Boston, and that was unheard of 20 years ago. We never did that. Worcester might have been once or twice a year. Now it's, 2 or 3 times a month that we're going to Worcester.
Okay.
And because that's, if you're having a true heart attack, you've got serious trauma, that's where you're going to get treated. We've got the stuff to keep you going until you get there, but that's where it's going. And like I say, it's an aging population, as they say. So.
Absolutely. When was our last salary comparison study done? I mean, are we
Probably
that low?
2 years ago, last contract negotiations for the full-time people.
How did we look when we came out of that?
We were lower middle,
Okay.
but our guys work a 48-hour week. The average for most departments is a 42-hour week. Basically, it comes down to you work a day on, 2 days off versus a 1 day on, 3 days off.
Okay.
And that's a tough one to compete. There are not a lot of departments that are working a 48. And the challenge also with that, with a 42, is you're covering 7 days a week. And that's a conversation I've had with the union leadership and myself. They'd rather see more people on the shift. I'd rather see the longer coverage. And we're working together. We have a good relationship, and we're discussing that. So.
Okay. Last question I have is just, are we still going to, are we set to make it to early to mid 2025 if we don't get the truck delivered?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That truck will probably stay with us once we retire it. It'll become the water rescue truck and replace a 1998 ambulance that's older than some of the people riding on it now. And again, it's going to go from doing several hundred calls a year to probably doing less than 50.
Okay.
So we'll get some more time out of that for that purpose, but it won't run as an ambulance. If anybody's ridden in that truck, it's not the most comfortable ride because it's a heavy truck.
Gotcha.
The newer ones are much more comfortable.
Excellent. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments for the chief before? Okay. Is there any public comment regarding the chief's presentation before we move on to the schools? Seeing none, I think you're good.
All right, thank you.
Very much.
Take care.
Thanks, Chief.
All right, so next on the agenda is the school department. However, we're not getting the full presentation tonight. They are presenting the full presentation on the 21st after they vote on what budget they're going to have. And I had spoken to the superintendent and asked if we could have department heads available for questions that evening so that we could not have to come back to, or have questions answered and sent back to us, but actually have the full discussion right then and there. And for that evening, there are 2 department heads that are not going to be available, the facilities and the special education. So they are both here this evening to kind of go over line items, go over conversations. The facilities department has put forward a couple documents showing what's been done and what needs to be done in the buildings for keeping up maintenance. And I just wanted to have a chance for a discussion with those department heads now, rather than have to ask questions and then get it pushed back. So if you'd like to come on up. Okay. Since I know you have an early flight, do you want to start with special education? Okay. Let me pull up.
And I'm Juliana Hanscom, by the way, Director of Special Services.
Let me pull
And I'll
up.
just give everybody a little bit of advance notice that the budgets that you have, the most recent versions of budgets that you have, are now becoming outdated. There are some updates that are not quite completed yet. So you may have additional questions when we review the full budget, but I don't believe that we'll have any significant changes in these 2 department lines.
Okay.
So the way you gave it to us last time was really good. If you could do that again, then I can kind of quickly
Yep.
put it into pivot tables and analyze it and see where there may be questions quickly.
Sure.
So
Yep.
I appreciate that level of detail, and
Yep.
that format worked out really well.
I'm glad because it can get to be very overwhelming and very confusing with so many different variations.
Yep.
We, just as, again, a point of information, we did receive some questions about lines that didn't quite match in the different versions, wanting explanation for some of those things. We did catch that, as an example, one of the cuts to the middle school guidance counseling position, there's a cut, but it's actually going to be a split between the middle school and high school. And in one version of the budget, the half was carried in the right portion of the school, half at the high school, half at the middle school. But in a different version, the salaries all come out the same, but it wasn't notated that way. So we've gone back and cleaned up some of those small details as well. Didn't change the bottom line, but just to have them properly notated within the budget.
Okay.
I am going to pull up, Chris, your pivot table, or your version of it, which is, it's the same version, it's just been
So
analyzed.
the last version that you all received is the last version that was publicly released.
Right.
There's been some ongoing conversation with the town manager. Obviously, since the last version was released, there's the new growth monies that will be coming to our budget, so we're updating currently to include those monies. And earlier in the week, one of the select board members mentioned the possibility of pulling some of the projects that we have budgeted in our facility lines out and maybe funding through ARPA money. So again, that's something, that conversation is ongoing. Nothing definitive there yet. So things I believe are going to continue to evolve, probably right up until I walk in the door to give my budget presentation next Wednesday night to the school committee. And then that will be the update that I provide for this body as well the following night.
Okay.
But I will do what I can to get you as much updated information in advance as I can, because I know that it's beneficial for you to be able to go through the lines and compare. But hopefully you'll have some of the information in advance of that, so you won't have as many questions perhaps.
Are there any preliminary questions for at least the special education portion? For Ms. Hanscom. Chris is looking at
I know that
charts.
Mr. Menard had mentioned that he was interested in understanding the circuit breaker, and I know that you attended the school committee meeting when we did the presentation on circuit breaker.
Yeah,
So we answered questions that you might have had.
you may have answered them, but someone caused problems at that meeting. Cut the volume.
Let's not revisit that.
I would like to go on the record and say that I continued on.
She did. She did.
I utilized the just ignore factor and, you know.
We couldn't hear it on the Zoom, though, that was the
So
problem.
unfortunately,
We could.
what ended up happening was, if you've come into the actual physical location where we have those hybrid meetings from the high school, there's a cart with all the tech equipment, picking up the wireless mics, the camera, so on and so forth. That, I log in, and that is the one that is the audio for in the room and on Zoom. And somehow, during that whole thing that we were trying to shut down and manage, that login was removed from the meeting. So it took a couple minutes for us to figure that out, and then I tried to figure out how I could get audio on my laptop. So yes, there was some missed audio. Happily, PAC was there videoing that meeting, so
I didn't see it get posted, though. Has
the
it?
PAC version didn't get posted?
It is now.
It is now?
I know they had some work to do.
Did it have that presentation on the circuit breaker?
I don't know if I have the whole.
Okay.
If you have any questions about it,
So I guess-
you can ask me now, or you can schedule a time and you can call me later, and I don't mind walking through with you, or you can even come in and I can sit down with you, because it does get really particular, and there's so many different facets, and you may be looking at something different than someone else, so
So I
can
guess
talk
my
more.
question would boil down to, there are some large out-of-district placements, do you see circuit breaker coming into play fiscal year '25, fiscal year '24? And is there anything that can be done in the budget related to circuit breaker, either now or at special town meeting? And how's that all kind of accounted for? Is it just, if it comes in, it's kind of happy birthday, but if not, it's not?
Not exactly happy birthday, but
No, so I do a forecast, because it's a reimbursement, it's a true reimbursement. So I can look at the district, the out-of-districts that we have currently right now, and then based on the formulas that they give me, the 4 times the foundation, I can put that against the OSD given tuitions, and I can get a pretty good estimate as to what it is. What I've done in the past is I've come up with reimbursement at 65%, 70%, 75%, and then felt out from October to January to see like what I was hearing, what it might be reimbursed at. The last like 3 to 4 years, it's been reimbursed at 75%. I haven't heard that that's going to change at all. Kate's a little less optimistic than I am
Just
on
by
the
nature.
75%. Because they've now incorporated also some transportation reimbursement. And so what we've been told is that they would do the circuit breaker full reimbursement first before they would start reimbursing for the transportation. So that's why I think we have some wiggle room for the 75%. That being said, I've factored in the transportation at a 50% reimbursement, but I haven't put that towards the tuitions for next year as far as an offset for that, because we have no wiggle room whatsoever. So I really didn't want to eat up even that little amount of transportation by having it put in towards that. My understanding is that the circuit breaker goes into its own account and that it can be rolled over for 1 year.
Okay, that's a reserve account?
I don't know if they classify it as a reserve account or it's just the circuit breaker account, but we put monies, like this year we had tuitions and we had some leftover monies from '23 that carried over, and so we hit those monies first out of circuit breaker to cover those tuitions, and now we're into '24. And so I'm working with the business people currently to figure out how much we have to roll over for next year. It doesn't look like it's going to be as significant as it has been in the past because we've been hit with 2 big years of that inflation. Last year it was like $128,000 when OSD raised their rates by over 14% per tuition. And this year it's 4.69, and I think that equals out to about a $50,000 increase, just for having the same placements we have without even another student going out.
Right, and that said, I'm aware, as is Juliana, that our collaborative, our Keystone Collaborative, they're looking at raising rates
Almost 11%.
almost 11%. So when you're thinking, all right, it's going to be a 4%, and then you've got somebody that comes in at 11%.
It throws it off.
It does. And one of the situations that we've had, a student, let's say, move in to Lunenburg, who's already in an out-of-district placement, we end up picking up that out-of-district placement, even though we didn't budget for it. So yes, Juliana's pretty good at figuring all this out and anticipating. Like I said, it makes me a little bit nervous when we count on the state following through at a past reimbursement rate, especially looking at next year, knowing that the state budget is struggling as well. But yeah, it's what you see in those lines already factors in circuit breaker
Yes.
At
reimbursement.
50% though?
75.
75.
75, okay, sorry. Okay.
I'm wondering that 14% increase you had last year, can you give us a rough idea on how you absorbed that? I don't want absolute details, but if you can remember, I mean, we've all been through a million numbers, so.
I'm guessing that it was probably absorbed with a lot of the carryover for the circuit breaker monies, and that's why we're seeing that account go down from the carryover from year to year.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and we're only allowed a certain amount that can be carried over.
No, it can be carried over to just 1 year. I don't think it's
1
like it is in the grants, in the Title I grants, where they have to spend the 85%. I think with circuit breaker, you can carry it over, like I said, for that full 1 year. But yeah, we did not expect that 14%, and I can tell you, even up until this time last year, I was like, there is no way it's going to be 14%, because somebody in the state is going to get word of it, the superintendents are going to revolt, and then it went through, and I was like, wow, I've got to eat crow now, because it really is 14%. That was huge, but we were able to absorb it, I think, with last year's circuit breaker money. But moving forward, now it's that additional cost, and now 4.69, which is
Right.
additional 49,000 for this year.
And still, the Keystone Collaborative rate has not yet been set. But we're way too deep into our budget development for next year to pivot and factor in those costs, especially when it's not set yet. So that's part of our challenge too, is that sometimes we just don't have all the information in a timeline that matches the budget development cycle here in town. We've mentioned this before. We don't find out our grant allocation for our federal grants until late July, sometimes early August. We have to turn around our grant submissions and have them approved as quickly as we possibly can, because at that point, school's opening for us in about 2 to 3 weeks after we submit a grant application, if we can turn it around that quickly. So if we're anticipating in this budget that we'll be able to fund certain positions out of certain grants or offset some of the full salary by applying some grant funding to that salary, and then if the monies don't come in at the same level and we see a reduction, we have to figure it out. But we do the best we can to anticipate and optimize the grant funding so that we can keep the local budget as low as we can.
I haven't been able to get a clear answer on one question that I've asked a number of people that I thought would have the answer. And this isn't directly related to the budget, but then again, it really is. And that is, under your collective bargaining agreements, there is an absolute drop-dead date that members of those unions need to be notified that they are potentially going to be laid off.
That's correct.
Do you have that date?
I'm not sure that it's exactly the same in all of the different contracts. I believe the teachers is June 1st, but I'd have to verify that.
I'd appreciate that. There's a reason behind me asking, but
Okay.
it doesn't need to come up right now. Thank you.
So there is a cut in the needs base for a special ed teacher. Would you be able to keep up with all your IEPs and your?
Yeah, for all the cuts that we came up with, it would not be impactful as far as us not being able to implement the IEPs. It might just be a different way in which we're implementing the IEPs and consolidating programs. For example, one of the teacher cuts that one of the teacher cuts at Turkey Hill, we know that for right now, enrollment is low in those two programs for this year and for next year, as it stands. That being said, if we get students that move in, or if we get students that come from the primary and have that difficult time adjusting to Turkey Hill and need to be put in that sub-separate, that might increase the numbers, because as of right now, the numbers are low enough to where we felt we could combine those two programs and just make the one program for this year and next year. But then the following year, we already see if the trajectory is the way it is, we're gonna have to reinstate that program. But we were, and you know, it's never a great thing to separate then combine, then separate then combine. It throws off the teachers, it throws off the students, but when we're looking at this kind of a fiscal budget, I couldn't say, well, no, I want to keep a classroom of 3 and a classroom of 4 with one teacher each, but yet cut and let's make class size go up to 26, 27 in certain situations. So it's not going to impact the IEPs for right now.
Okay.
I have kind of a follow-up question on that. So if you can kind of give a little bit more information on those numbers that helps you decide on what you're putting down on proposed budget. So the teacher specialist for each school, is that based on how many kids have educational contracts, and how do you anticipate more educational contracts or more children in need of special services?
Are you talking about for those sub-separate programs?
For all programs, for special ed.
I'm not understanding the question.
So you have children across the board, whether it's in, you know, the preschool, primary, elementary, middle, high, that have educational contracts in some form or another, not just IEPs, but you have other contracts and kids with services. So when you're factoring in on a proposed budget for how many teachers you need, what is your mathematical equation to get to that? What are the classroom size? What are the students that are on said programs, and how are you anticipating that? I would imagine that it's a hard thing to anticipate how many kids in 2025 are going to require services at all of the schools. So I'm curious how you work a formula to say this is how many teachers that we need, and how does that affect the ratio between teacher and student and those needs?
So there's not really a formula.
There's not, but I know the students that are in the programs this year, and I know which programs are going to next year. And so we do start on that process at the beginning of the budget cycle, where we look and we transfer those students like from 5th grade to 6th grade, from 2nd grade to 3rd grade, and then we look at those sub-separate programs to see if they're getting larger or if they're smaller, and then we reallocate as needed from that standpoint. We haven't had that big of an increase or decrease to really warrant looking at like my inclusive staff, my inclusion teachers. and that being having to cut or add due to those caseloads, because those caseloads, they roughly go up between like 15 to 20 per teacher, which right now is manageable, depending on the severity of the students, because even the students in inclusion, some of them can have more needs than others. But the inclusion teachers roughly have that caseload between 15 to 20, some might have a few more than that. And then we may have additional para support for those that have a higher caseload. The sub-separate programs that we have a pretty good idea, like I said, from year to year, because we see that trajectory. Plus we have a referral process in place to where we really make sure that we've collected the data to place students appropriately in the least restrictive environment, and that we've got that data to be able to show that they really do need that additional level of support to be in a sub-separate program.
Okay,
And if it came up to where we needed more, and if we had a boom, I'm talking to Kate about it.
One of the reasons I asked the question is because I'm looking at the needs-based proposed budget, and again, I understand that this is going to change again, and these are proposed budgets, and I also appreciate the format that this is put in, because instead of looking at 5 different spreadsheets at a time, it's consolidated. But I'm looking at the elementary school special ed resource room teacher, and the needs-based budget's increasing by 34%, and then the middle school is 17%. So I'm just wondering, how do you decrease that needs-based budget at the elementary school by 1/3?
So that really is just connected to the salary. That percentage is the percentage change of the salaries in that line. The reduction at Turkey Hill is 1 teacher, and it's to consolidate those 2 sub-separate programs into 1 based on the smaller number of students that are in that program for next year. The change at the middle
High
school is a position, there's a salary change there, because when we cut positions, some teachers may have multiple areas of certification, and if their position that they're in currently is being eliminated, but they have more seniority and experience than a newer teacher to the district, they can bump a least senior teacher out of that position. So that's part of the challenge when you look across the 3 different budgets. One of the questions that we got was, why is the budget that has the most cuts, why am I seeing increases in salary lines in different areas? That's why. Because more senior teachers are bumping a lower salaried person out, and therefore that salary goes to that line with them. So
I appreciate the answer to those questions, because I think the community right now, they're looking at the numbers and what's behind the numbers. What's the thought process? Why are those decisions being made on a needs-based budget or a proposed budget or any budget in general? So it helps, I think, the community in general, and that's my belief, to understand the thought process behind what's on the paper.
Right.
Because when you look at the paper, sometimes it's scary.
yeah, which is why in the latest version of what I now call the rainbow sheet, we put the cuts for each of the budgets at the very bottom. So if you follow the yellow budget all the way down, you'll see all of the cuts that come with that budget. So if somebody was concerned about 30% decrease in the staffing of special ed at a particular building, if you look down, you're seeing that it's actually just the 1 position that's being cut.
Okay, thank you.
In one of the many iterations that we've been staring at over the past couple months, and honestly, I don't know if it was just one of the early lists of what was going to be cut. It may have been that. But one thing I kind of caught, I've got one question before I continue this. We have an anomaly class. Are they in 5th grade this year or 6th grade this year?
You mean the large class?
The large class?
Yep. So we have a larger class size currently this year in the 5th grade.
5th grade, okay.
Next year, they'll be in the 6th grade. But when you look at the class size of next year's 8th grade, 7th grade, and 6th grade, Mr. Santry is going to be able to reassign teachers who maybe this year are teaching at the 7th grade to teach at the 6th grade.
Okay.
Therefore, you know, the class sizes won't, you know,
The
become
reason I
too
bring up
large.
the question, and I needed to know for sure that it was the 5th grade, I thought it was, but I just needed to be sure. In that list of eliminated positions, there was one 5th grade teacher.
That's correct.
Now, that's a transfer from 5th grade to 6th grade, correct? Not a loss of a position.
Nope, that's a loss of a position, because we don't need to move that FTE teacher up to the middle school, because based on this year's 8th grade leaving to go up to the high school, and looking forward to next year's 8th grade class size, 7th grade class size, and 6th grade class size, Mr. Santry can reassign teachers from the 7th or the 8th grade, where the numbers are going to be lower next year,
Okay,
and
so,
reassign them to the 6th grade. So we don't have to carry that FTE and transfer up to the middle school. They already will have enough flexibility with the staff that they have currently to provide enough teachers at the 6th grade level and still not shortchange increasing class size at the 7th and 8th grade level.
okay. My point is that what it boils down to is we're cutting a position here, and we're shifting one in the higher 4 grades. But we're not counting that 8th grade shift as a eliminated position. That's my concern.
So at the middle school, we're going to give you a little insight into our world. At the middle school, we're going to have 2 retirements. One of those retirements is going to be filled when another position is cut. That person has more seniority and has that license and can bump in to backfill that retirement.
Okay.
And then somebody from that grade level with that retirement filled, there's an extra teacher that can be reassigned to the 6th grade. And then there's another retirement that just will not be filled. So that's an actual cut.
Okay, thank you very much.
Dave, one second. You just called my daughter an anomaly, by the way. I just want to make sure you know that. Now, go ahead, Tiff.
On that note, one of your budgets, I don't see it on the one that I'm looking at right now, the most recent, it affected the middle school assistant principal, and with that anomaly class going into the middle school, I don't see that on here on the needs-based, but that is a bigger class that is going into 6th grade. I understand and appreciate the explanation on the balancing act for special services and students in general going into the 6th grade, because you still have 2 other grades to consider, obviously. But not having that middle school assistant principal, I think, is a really big deal. You know, not to say it in, you know, layman's terms or to be too blunt, but I'm personally concerned as a community member, as a mom with kids in school, and not having that position at that school. And right now, Mr. Santry is the principal for 2 schools.
Yes.
You don't have 2 principals, one designated to middle and high. So
Correct.
Mr. Santry's plate, in my personal opinion, is very full. And cutting that role of the assistant principal for the middle school, I think could be very devastating.
Which is
to
why
the
it's
school.
not in the needs-based budget.
So that's what I wanted
It's
some.
only when we have to get down, or we're anticipating having to get down to that 2.9 budget. That's when that cut came in. Just for clarification around that, I agree wholeheartedly. I think the actual job that the assistant principals do is significant in terms of supporting families, supporting students, the climate and culture inside the building. They connect and make bonds with students. And when you have students with social emotional challenges at the younger grades, they tend to manifest as behaviors that are disruptive. When you have somebody that's in the building every day and that's your safe person, it helps. We have seen a difference in the number of kiddos, the number of restraints that have to be done with the youngest of our students. That's in part a credit to our BCBAs, our Board Certified Behavior Analysts, that work with teachers on strategies, and they work with students on strategies that they can employ. But it also comes down to having that assistant principal in the building every day. When we had shared assistant principals, the model before we went to a full-time assistant principal in each building, Turkey Hill had a principal, Primary had a principal, and there was one assistant principal split between the two buildings, and you're never fully there to address, if you had been dealing with an assistant principal, but today is not the day that the assistant principal is at your child's building, he's at a different building. The continuity for communication with families, the continuity support for the kiddos in the building, the continuity of support for the staff in the building. Again, having a dedicated full-time person there to assist the principal, to become the principal for the day if the principal is out sick. And our principals do get COVID like everybody else, and they're out for several days. You have somebody who knows the building, knows the kids, knows the staff, knows the families, can step into that role and manage the building while a principal's out. It's less frantic and chaotic. I don't know which building are they in today. At the middle high school, originally, we had planned for one principal, one assistant principal at the high school, one principal, one assistant principal at the middle school. But there was a circumstance where one of those principalships was vacated, and Mr. Santry was appointed as an interim to manage both buildings. It worked out really well. The staff was happy having one principal for the building. So in shifting that model, we went from 4 administrators in the building, 2 principals, 2 assistant principals, to 4 administrators in the building, 1 principal, 3 assistant principals. So the cut of an assistant principal in our worst-case scenario budget, the plan was to have that 1 principal, 1 assistant principal who could be on the high school side of the house, 1 assistant principal who could be on the middle school side of the house, and they could be supported by a teacher with a stipended role as a dean. Not optimal, but it would have given some additional support to the administrative team. Again, not optional. I mean, optimal. But we, again, don't make that cut until our worst-case budget.
I think in the worst-case scenario, I am just going to, say one more thing about the middle school assistant principal. You have someone with a lot of experience.
Yep.
And to remove that person, I think would still be devastating in the worst-case scenario. And I would implore you to look elsewhere to make different types of cuts, because he's your boots on the ground. And to replace that person with someone else and shift things around. And I mean, this isn't a good scenario one way or the next, because you're talking about cutting people and there's going to be sufferance one way or the next. But with the bigger class going into the middle school, I think having someone that's built relationships, that has the experience, that has been there, is something that I, again, would implore you to look at in a worst case scenario. And it is exactly what it is. It's a worst-case scenario. Like, I understand that, so it's really not just, as a finance committee member, it's also as a parent as well.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Do you have any more questions for?
I had a couple of quick questions.
Go right
The high school department heads, there's a $25,000 budget line. There was nothing there before. Was that something contractual, or was that?
It is
broken out from
contractual.
another?
It's a stipend that they get on top of their teacher salary for their responsibilities as department head. Previously, that had been covered out of a revolving account. But it is contractual.
So is this new this year, or just came from another line item that was somewhere else?
It was funded by a different account,
Okay.
not in the local budget. But it is contractual. It really should be in the budget.
And the other one had to do with the curriculum special ed directors. I noticed over the last 3 and now 4 years, a larger, is that additional people, is it curriculum, is that additional curriculum, or what is?
So is that the curriculum line where FY '24, it was 91,000, and now
No, it was, let's see, 24 was 234 and 271 this time, and it was 203 a couple of years ago. So it's just been growing a lot faster than others, and it's line 2110.
Right, so in that line, the first breakout is the student services coordinator,
I think he's looking at
and then the
different
next line down is the instructional services director.
Okay,
Is that where you're at?
Those are the two lines.
okay.
Or are you down at the special ed clerical,
No, it's the one right above that.
the Title I director?
Okay, I'm looking at the spreadsheet that Chris created, so I'm not,
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to find it on her spreadsheet.
it's line 2110, I think.
So you're looking at a combined,
It just grew a little faster than others, up 36,000 from last year to this year, and it was, that's a big, over 10% increase. I just didn't know what
So-
caused that. Was it curriculum? Was it
Nope.
adding a staff and part-time from a prior year and things like that?
so I think you're probably looking at a combined total for that section of the budget.
Yep.
If you look at it broken out in the version that's posted on the district webpage, you'll see there that it's the instructional services director, that's the curriculum
Right.
director. The reason for the jump is that when we put this position, the last time the district had a curriculum director position was in 2012. I believe June of 2012, and that was it. Then with COVID and the pivot for teachers to teach a whole new way, teaching remote, teaching streaming, technology, they needed resources that they could use online. We pivoted and put a curriculum position in interim. And then we moved to keep that position. It was something that the school committee had wanted. Even in my very first budget presentation here in this district, they were disappointed that I did not reinstate a curriculum director at that time. So when we put that position in, we partially funded the position in the local budget and had some offset through, let's say, the Title I grant. But the goal was always to gradually add a little more FTE into the budget until the full salary would be carried in the local budget. So that's why you see it increasing each year. For 2 years, it was at a 0.6, offset with grants for 0.4, then it went to a 0.8, and now next year, it'll be up to a full FTE carried in the budget. So nobody got big raises. I know that that's, you know, a lot of people are looking at that and thinking that that's what happened. That's not what happened.
There's usually good explanations for
Yeah.
it, especially after they've been looked at 1,000 times by
Yeah.
1,000 different people. So
But-
that was my expectation
But
for
that's,
something like that.
I think that's what you're seeing there.
Thank you for that. That was
Yep.
very good.
I think this question's been asked probably 3 or 4 times through the process. But collective bargaining agreements expected to be negotiated in 2025.
So we are currently engaged with the teachers' union. And when I say teachers' union, just so everybody knows, teachers are part of that group, our nurses, our school psychologists, pretty much anybody who works in the school that isn't a part of a different group. Our paraprofessionals have their own group, our secretaries have their own group, custodians, and our cafeteria workers. So, other than the administrators, pretty much anybody that we hire is carried in that teacher's bargaining unit.
In general, is that the LEA or is it?
That is the
broad?
LEA,
Okay.
and we're engaged with them currently. Their current contract expires June 30th.
Okay, do we have another one that expires in '25?
That expires in '25?
No.
Expires in
You'll-
June?
That you'll
Yes.
begin negotiations and
We-
your funding in '25.
We have our first preliminary meeting with our paraprofessionals union next week. And those are the two groups that we're bargaining with. There are a couple of individual contracts that are also up June 30th. Nothing of a major impact. But the bulk of that, it's those two groups.
So the reason I ask that question is that if you track the salary reserve account, at least the way I have always tracked it, is that you're looking at what is anticipated as the first year cost of the contracts that are under negotiation in that fiscal year. So, again, rough numbers, I did not put it in a calculator, but across all 3 budgets, we're looking at roughly $330,000 as an average. So that means close to $1 million increase over 3 years of the contracts.
Not necessarily.
Excuse me?
Not necessarily. Like you said, that's the anticipated potential for the first year. That does not necessarily guarantee that whatever is negotiated for year 1 of the 3 years is going to then be also year 2 and 3. We have, if you go back and look historically, there are contracts where there might have been, I don't know, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but let's say year 1 was a 2%, the next year was a 2.5%, and then the following third year was a 1%. So it doesn't necessarily carry forward that this is what the cost is for year 1, so this will also be year 2 and year 3.
It was a number of years ago and before you came to Lunenburg, there was one contract negotiation that netted $1.2 million over 3 years. And that had opened a lot of people's eyes and, you know, and I understand you've got a substantial group of people there, but I implore you to negotiate hard on this. And I'm not going to try to quote percentages or pay scales or averages or anything like that, but it's a known fact that the teachers in Lunenburg do get paid well. And you can argue that all you want, but out in the industry, my ex-wife was in North Middlesex for 20-some odd years, and the place to go for the salary has always been Lunenburg.
So we do comparative analyses as well, and we do the comparison looking at the pay for entry, mid-level steps, highest level step. So
No, I understand you go through the process.
Well, it's possible that our entry-level salary is a little bit better than some of the other comparable districts. But then it's also possible that on the high end, not so much. So we do look closely at that. Yep.
And if I remember correctly, and again, my memory's getting fuzzy for those back that many years, and that was one of the things that happened in that contract, was that on the top end, there were, I believe, 2 steps added. And as I said the other night at the select board meeting, I've been talking for a decade and a half that, you know, those types of increases are not sustainable unless we do something different on our revenue side.
Yep, and I will echo what has been said relative to staffing challenges for town departments. You know, the chief echoed, you know, that, okay, we get some people in, we train them, they go and they make better money somewhere else. If we don't stay competitive with our salaries in the school department, what you will see is that that same routine will happen for our staffing as well, where teachers come in, they work with us for a handful of years, get some experience, and then go take a job somewhere else. The risk there is what I call the revolving door. It's hard to build community and culture within the school when teachers are coming and going all the time. It's even worse when you have a revolving door for the administration running the school. And we had that challenge at the primary before I arrived. I want to say they had 3 or 4 different principals in a 9-year period of time.
4.
It's hard to get that continuity, because oftentimes when you have leadership changes, there's a slightly different philosophy, different priorities, a different direction that we're gonna go. So you never get that consistent forward progress in any one direction. You take a step forward and then you pivot because now we're gonna go that way. Okay, but now somebody new comes in and we're going back this way. You need the momentum for that forward progress, and having stability in your staffing gives you that. So I hear what you're saying, but just know that there are unintended consequences for not keeping pace with salaries for the school department, and that's in all areas, not just the teaching unit.
There's another thing involved here too, and you know, my parents and probably, I would say, the generation before them, they got into jobs and they stayed in them.
That doesn't
From the
happen much
beginning.
anymore.
That's correct. Our workforce today, in all areas, nobody goes into a job with an intention of staying more than, I believe it's 5 to 7 years. Even if they're getting paid well, they don't intend to stay in positions for long periods of time. So yes, throwing money at it does help stabilize it a little bit, but it's not going to stem the tide.
Yeah, once upon a time, in my early years here, we would see turnover in positions largely because a position opened up closer to home. Now I have children. I don't want to lose time from my family in a commute. I want to be closer to home. Or there was an opportunity for advancing their career, taking a step up in a job. The last 2 years, we are seeing much more. I can make more money.
Yeah.
I have a better benefit over there, and they're going.
I have 3 staff in just one of my buildings. 2 of them I know, they told me left because they got more money somewhere else. And that was, it's been devastating for that one school this year, from a special education standpoint, to manage that school with the staff, because we haven't been able to fill some of those positions adequately. So I think the tides are changing to a certain degree. I also think people are going to leave for a variety of reasons.
Right.
To your
I'm
point,
just saying, and I understand, the longer people stay in a position for your needs especially, the better off you are, the children are, and everything. But in private industry, nobody plans. I've been a plant manager. Nowadays, you don't plan for anybody to be around that long. That's why mechanization has gone rampant, because you can't count on a workforce that's going to stick around and know what they're doing for any period of time.
Right.
But thank you.
to your point, it is difficult when people move, but I have done some research on this, and for a town our size in Massachusetts, our teachers are paid very competitively. And I think people...
When you look at it generally, yes.
Yes,
But
like,
you-
we're not
yep.
on the lower end of things for, teacher salaries in the town of Lunenburg. And, very respectfully, I think there's a lot of different reasons that people do leave. It's not just salary-based, it's relationship building and, collaborative work in schools, and when you have a lot of staff changes or changes, with taking this person from this school or moving him over here, or what you were saying about, having an assistant principal at both and trying new things, there's ramifications to that. So it really does affect it. I think to look at what we are paying, we, the town of Lunenburg, for our teachers in the salaries, I absolutely agree with Mr. Passios on that. I do think that we are competitive, and to stay competitive is fine, but we don't need to, overpay either.
We will never be able to overpay. That is something that I think the school committee fully understands. My point is, we never heard that reason for people leaving until more recently. Now it seems that is most oftentimes the reason that people are leaving.
That's the reason they're giving us.
Right.
That's the reason they're giving you, right?
I think we have a union, and we have, and you guys are negotiating with them, and I think that's the proper place for that, and you guys will fight to make sure they get a fair deal, but the town also gets a fair deal. I think
Correct.
that's ultimately what we can hope for. I do notice that, I was looking at some other town, it's Lunenburg, so maybe because it might cost a little more to live here, if people wanted to live here, obviously that has to take an effect. There's certain places in certain areas where you got to pay a little more. But I think ultimately, it's ultimately that if their scale goes so high that this town won't be able to afford it, and then there'll be
Right.
fewer of them to get paid the high salaries.
You are correct.
And they'll have a much worse working environment.
You are correct.
So it's, they need to understand, that side needs to understand. I think the fire chief was talking about working with his unions, and it's not always like this.
Correct.
It can be a collaborative, let's discuss what do we want to achieve together? And how do I make sure that we, because it's not just salaries, it's also benefits and other things too. And so I think as long as you guys have that attitude, I don't know enough about the internals of those things. That's what you guys have, so I would support your effort of trying to do the best job you can for the town.
Will do.
The reason I bring it preemptively up now, and probably will repeat it again over the next few months, is that there are checks and balances in place for collective bargaining agreements on the town side, whereas town meeting has to approve the funding of the first year of the contract. So that has to be brought to town meeting. If town meeting's paying attention and they really have an issue with what's been negotiated by the Board of Selectmen and the town manager, then they can say no to that first year, and it goes back to collective bargaining. On the school side, and I understand it's by law and so on and so forth, you have a negotiating team and you have a 5-member school committee that are the check and balance against that collective bargaining agreement. The rest of the town does not have a say in it, other than cutting the budget so severely that you have to cut positions because you can't fund the salaries.
I just, as a point of information though, the town manager does have a vote on the ratification of all of our contracts.
I neglected to cover that, yes, thank you. Case in point, and it happened a number of years ago, but the city of Boston. And I've never heard how they ever came up with the collective bargaining agreement that they had with the firefighters in Boston. It was just unbelievably expensive, and the city council pushed back and said, no, take it back. Take it back to collective bargaining. So, city council or town meeting is able to do that, whereas in our scenarios here, with school collective bargaining agreements, we don't have that extra check.
One other question. I heard Selectman Jeffries was talking about maintenance for the buildings. And we have, the high school is maybe 8 years old, and the primary school is pushing 20, I think. And we've talked a lot about Turkey Hill. Is there enough in the budget? I mean, probably never enough in the budget, but do you feel confident that you'll be able to maintain the buildings at a decent level?
Before we get to facilities, I want to make sure we finish up with special
Oh, I'm
education
sorry.
first. No, that's okay, just because Ms. Hanscom is getting on a plane soon.
Oh.
My husband likes to be the first one at the airport.
So it's leaving next week, and you're just getting there early?
That's not a bad thing. I missed putting my bag on the belt by 1 minute and had to wait 6 hours.
Are there any other questions for special education first? Okay,
Thank you.
I'm good.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now with that, let's move over to facilities. Mr. Gray.
That's my question. Do you think you have enough money, or enough to do the things that will maintain the school at a decent level?
So that's always a tricky question to answer, because unexpected things happen.
Sure.
This year, as an example, we had a problem with one of the elevators at the middle high school. Somebody came in and assessed the situation. It cost us $14,800 to repair, and then state came in to do the inspection to get the elevator back online, and it failed inspection because there was a leak in the hydraulics. The initial quote that we got from the same company that we dealt with was roughly another $15,000. But we're pursuing other quotes for that repair to see if we can get something better. So in the end, an unexpected elevator repair to the tune of $30,000, those are the kinds of things that come up. We have been troubleshooting HVAC systems in all the buildings for the last couple of years. To Mr. Heavy's credit, he has pursued them and gotten to the bottom of some things and has quotes for repairs for those. Others we're still trying to troubleshoot and identify the point of failure, if you will, the repair that's needed. So we're still in a process of trying to figure that out. So we have attempted to build some things into the facilities budget, but honestly, any day something could go, and it's the kind of situation that I can't always wait till the fall and put it on a capital plan to submit for capital plan funding, and then wait until July 1 after that to do the repair. So if we have a heating system failure in January, we need to fix it, whatever that cost is. So we do the best we can.
Some of the larger ticket items, like heating systems, need to be replaced. I don't know, like, let's say the primary school, I don't know what the average life is. Let's say it's 20, 25 years. We're getting close to that. Is that on a capital plan that would be submitted at some point, saying we need to upgrade or do a major overhaul or whatever is needed?
There are a few projects in the out years of the capital plan. You know, whether or not we want to pivot and consider some of the more energy efficient upgrades to systems like that are eligible for grant funding. A lot, including the MSBA, is moving away from reimbursing or providing funds for facilities that aren't green. But I'll let Mr. Heavey speak to some of what he's finding. He started with us in late October, so he's had an awful lot on his plate, and he's done an awful lot of work, a lot of good work. And I think, you know, once he finishes one full year with us, he'll have the sense of the ebb and flow, the normal flow of utility bills, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the budget that we build for facilities next year, for FY '26, will potentially have increases in these lines, and it'll be really based on his assessment of the actual costs, the projected costs for repairs that he's seeing on the horizon, et cetera. But I'll let him speak to what he's learned in his short time with us thus far.
Yes, when I first got here, my plan was to go through each of the buildings and do an assessment to see where we're at. And I started at the primary school, and first place I went was the boiler rooms. And during my review, I found that we had a circulation pump that wasn't working. It froze up. So we needed to get that repaired, and we were able to get that rebuilt, to get it fixed and back up and running. And I believe that cost was about a $4,000 bill. And then in my short period of time, again, we had another circulation pump go down, which the bearings froze up on it. So we had to have that repaired. So a lot of the maintenance that I see that really needs to happen is getting some service level agreements in place. And that's something I'm looking at. And seeing how we can implement it. There are a lot of heating issues district-wide. When I went in and looked at the building system management for primary school, you log into the system and it shows you a layout of the school, and it'll show you your univents, it'll show you your boilers and your fans, your exhaust fans, and the whole screen looked like a Christmas tree. And it was blinking. And what that tells me is there's a lot of communication problems, there's a lot of issues with valves. It could be actuators, it could be controllers, which we've identified that we had a bad controller out on the floor. That piece of equipment alone was $10,000 just to replace. I have that put into my budget for next year. But those are the types of things that I'll come across as time goes on. But those are expensive things. I found 2 controllers over at the high school that I need to replace, the Jace controllers. And what that is like the brains that send out communications to the univents, the fans, the air handling units up on the roof. When one of those goes down, that's all computerized. You need special software to get into those. You need a technician with a certain skill to go in and be able to read that information and manipulate it. That's stuff that we don't have. So I had quoted out a technician, 2 technicians for an 8-hour day, because what I wanted to do was start going through the buildings. And that quote itself is about $3,200 for 2 techs for 8 hours. And the hope is to slowly chip away at it. Unless there's something that severely goes down that I have to get a tech in right away, you know, we'll have to deal with those costs. Some of it will be unexpected. But that's the type of stuff that happens in maintenance. You never know. We had air handling units up on the roof at the high school. We had 7 units down up there. And that was anywhere from freestats not working properly, fan motors, and other things that we needed to address. And that was a significant bill. That was a $26,000 bill to get a technician in there to fix that for 7 units. And that's stuff we have to address. I mean, that's heat in the building, that's controls.
I think there's 2 things at play here, though. There's an immediate need for what we need to get through next week and next month and in May on. The 4 years I've been on this committee, I've been pushing for a really good 10-year plan for operations as well as capital. Capital planning was making headway on that, and then everyone kind of got sucked into this budget season. We do plan to kind of hit on that 10-year. That's essential, is to get that 10-year plan laid out pretty well. On the operations side, I've said this again for many years, I need to see the school department and the municipal departments working together on maintenance and facilities to streamline as much as possible on that. But I guess my specific question for this budget is, I know we identified some IT equipment that could be purchased as capital. Is there other things in capital on this list, in your budget, in your operating budget, that could be exposed for that? When we did the capital plan, we did not know we were gonna be in the situation we sit here today in. I think the whole capital plan needs a relook before town meeting, because none of these were known. I don't even know if you'd still prioritize 3M equipment, film, in some of your capital requests, when that could mean that it's a teacher or something like that that's at play, right? So I think that's something that needs to be looked at through this, is what specifically could be pulled out of this budget, identified as capital, reassess the capital plan, and address it that way. Because every nickel we find, can be a teacher or something like that. So I guess that's a specific ask, specifically, as you're here today. I don't know if you have any comments on it. It's not fair for you to have a off the top of your head answer, but I think that some of the things that were talked about with the town manager, as well as some ideas that even Renee had this past week, are all things that need to be put on the table, because perhaps we can get through this next couple months. Perhaps some money comes in through the final state budgets, and it's not as drastic as we go forward if the 2.5 doesn't, go forward. But we got to make some hard decisions through this process, so.
Yep, for sure. And, relative to the capital request that we submitted from the school department, there was a truck on that, and it didn't make the cut.
Two from the line, yeah.
But earlier this winter, one of our trucks that we were hoping to be able to replace if that truck were approved, we couldn't use to plow because we couldn't put it into four-wheel drive because...
The drive shaft on that was rotted out.
And it just dropped out.
And I consulted, my maintenance guy consulted with the highway department to have them take a look at it, and they were in search of trying to find a new drive shaft for that.
Yeah, I frankly don't think the school department should be plowing their driveways. I just don't. I think that the DPW should. I don't buy this argument that there's emergencies, that you can plow the school driveway and then enter a road that's not plowed. I mean, it's not practical in my mind, and even with the fewer days that we see that happening in the change in weather patterns. So I was always kind of skeptical about that budget request anyways. I think the DPW should be moving snow and sanding and icing or not sanding, salting, I guess. But again, in the operating budget, is there things that we can, pull out as capital, reassess the capital plan, and put them onto even this year's capital plan? I know we went through a process. I don't care, right? I really don't. I think that process is flawed. And you know that I think it's flawed because Finance Committee put a article in a couple of years ago to kind of change that process. But again, that's just a little bit of a soapbox, but also maybe an idea for where we can find some monies.
Right, so we went back and took a look through the budget with this conversation about the possibility of ARPA funds as an example. Money that's in here for upgrades to the network for cybersecurity. There's money in here for the 911 upgrades to the telephone systems in all of the buildings. You had budgeted monies for HVAC repairs.
Can you get on the same phone system that the town's on now so that we don't have to pay a phone bill anymore? That it's all, these are the ideas I think we really got to pursue.
So I think one of the challenges, and I will have to consult with the IT folks and have a better answer for you next week.
Yeah.
But the last I thought I understood was that not all of our buildings are ready to go voice over IP. I believe it's the Turkey Hill is definitely not, the infrastructure for Turkey Hill is just not, I think that was definitely the one that was not capable of making that move. But I'll get some more information for you and have that next week.
And the 9/11 upgrade is going for a school committee warrant article as well to come out of free cash. So they pulled that one out.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's just one, that's just a go-do and reassess, what the capital planning committee came up with and, perhaps make some changes, right? I mean, you got to prioritize based on the situation we're in. We're in a different situation than we were.
Right, and it's hard when you don't always anticipate that something's going to become a significant financial impact. And then to have to wait to address it a year and a half out from when you identify that it's a problem. Sometimes we can't wait that long because there are things that have to be done. And that's why some of these things are in this budget, because they are that high level of priority, they have to be done.
Is it possible for you to send me or us a copy of the bus contract and the requirements associated with the bus contract?
Yeah, I can dig that up.
I think maybe you sent it a few years ago or something, but I also wonder if there's requirements that could be lessened on the bus contracts to allow for reductions in costs on it. Because if I recall, they were the buses can't be more than 5 years old. What if we could let them be 6 years old? If you go through those requirements, there's things that could just drive costs down.
Just think if we had our own buses, the federal government would have replaced them all this year with electric buses.
We will be going out to bid for the next cycle in January, December, January.
Bid.
Okay.
Yeah,
We'll hear from Dee.
right. We'll be getting our quote from Dee in
Dave's
January.
going to start a bus company.
Dee will force him right out.
I agree wholeheartedly about the snow removal. It doesn't make sense to me either. I think the snow removal should be considered to be done by DPW. Chris brought up a point a couple of weeks ago saying that, you can't get to the schools unless the roads are clear. So the roads have to be cleared first in order to get to the school, to plow the schools out.
Right.
And I think there is cost savings there by having that done. The town should take care of the schools. I think that's a line item that I think should be moved. I am wholeheartedly in agreement about your comment on snow removal.
So the only one thing I would offer on that thought is that possibly, under some circumstances, we may have to cancel school or delay if I have to wait for DPW, because they won't come to the schools to clear out the lots until the roads are clear to their satisfaction. So if our staff were working on clearing parking lots while they were out clearing roads, once I get the all clear from the DPW that we're gonna be good to have safe travel to get to school, maybe I still can open on time, maybe we had a delay to get everybody time to clear out, but possibly in that kind of a situation, I'd be canceling school for the day because I would have to wait until DPW took care of all of the roadways before they came. It is what it is. If that's how everybody wants to move forward, that's fine, but everybody needs to understand that there are gonna be possibly more no-school call days.
But I sat on the Blizzard board a few years back, and we've survived a pandemic as a world, not even as a country, like as a world. So if school has to get canceled a couple of times, I think there's other ways for the children to learn.
We can't, it's not allowable.
To do remote learning?
It's not allowable. Those days don't count. We cannot do it.
I still think,
The state ended that right after the pandemic because they saw that it didn't
I think
really
given the
work.
amount of snow days that we've had, though, I still think this is a point that we should be looking at to try to save that money on the line item, even if it means that you have to close school 5 days, a year or 7 days a year. And there's so many allowable school days too before it affects your school calendar. So I really do agree. I think it's something that should be looked at, and the
Yep.
town should be doing.
And like I said, that's
That's
fine.
fine.
Everybody just needs to understand that there may be other impacts
I
that
think
come
this
from
is-
that.
I think this is a discussion that we can have maybe after the budget season, because this is something, it's not just snow plowing, it's maintenance. You're doing a maintenance on this building or the school. Why do you, cutting grass? Well, you're doing the cemetery, you're doing the parks, you're doing this. It's all similar equipment, everything. Because there's the school and then there's the town, and never the two shall meet, it's an accounting thing. How do you budget it? How do you do it? It's also a management thing. How do you set up it so that if the town is actually doing all the plowing, how do you set it up so that the schools make sure that they're ready to open when they're down? It's purely management, communication, processes thing. And it's not something that's easily done, but it's just because it's hard doesn't mean you don't do it. So I think that's one of the things that we, and maybe ask others to discuss for future budgets. It might be something that might take a number of years, or it might not be worth it because of whatever other reasons. But I think it's something probably we're not going to solve today.
I think to go a step further, I think it's difficult, or it's not easy to initiate, but I think I could easily see a situation where if, after you get through the growing pains of it, where it just sort of becomes normal, and you figure out the little quirks.
I manage around 40 properties, and this is a scheduling matter. That's all this is. So once you implement that schedule and you have priority, this building has to get plowed out first, this road has to get out first. There is that work in the beginning because you have to plan for implementation. But once it's implemented and that schedule is done and someone says, okay, every 3 weeks the grass is going to get cut and Larry, John, and Sue are responsible for X, Y, and Z, it just becomes a natural routine. You get up in the morning, you brush your teeth, you go to work. You mow the lawn, you do the weeding, you do this. And you work it into their job descriptions. And instead of trying to get your daily task list, it's different. property management, you have all these unforeseens all the time. And whether it's a school or a commercial office building or a home, things come up. And, you know, looking at, this is one of my questions, your contracted services, given 4 school buildings, I actually think that's a very low number for $225,000. So.
That actually is the line that one of our projects is in. I think that's the 911 is in that line.
So my question is contracted services, is that elevators? Is that filter maintenance on HVAC? Is that boiler maintenance? What is contracted services? Is it fire alarm? Is it sprinkler? Are all the buildings sprinklered? What are the maintenance and how much are your facilities people able to do? I don't know how many facilities people you have that you manage, but are they changing filters on HVAC units? Are they capable of doing that? So I'd like to understand that.
They're currently doing replacement of air filters and belts.
Okay.
We have a service level agreement with one vendor to come in and service the units on the roofs
How often?
quarterly.
And then what else is a contracted service?
There's a variety of stuff under there, which is what you mentioned. The fire suppression inspections, the fire alarm inspections, these are all service level agreements that we have. What was that?
The boiler inspections in that
The
line?
boiler inspections. Right now, everything is kind of lumped under that one line item. And what I'm doing is I'm going through and I'm trying to sort out and break it down by school. So I get a better idea of what it costs per school for each of the service level agreements that we have. So if somebody asks me, well, what are we spending for, you know, primary school on heating, I can look at my spreadsheet and tell you. Right now, everything's under one line item, and it's tough to go through
Right.
and sort it all out. And that's what I'm doing now.
Seeing as you started in October, I can appreciate the challenge that you have, and it is a big one. I am very interested to see that breakdown because this is my wheelhouse. And if you don't pass your NFPA 25, that could cost you quite a bit of money, you know, just on sprinklers. And the preparation and the maintenance of those items leads me to my next question. Is this all on a schedule? Is it in a calendar? Does the superintendent see that? Is that just for you to see? Is that managed right now, or is that something that you're building? Because I think all of those implementations, they're going to save money down the road.
A lot of it, I'm putting together to get a better understanding of what we currently have. And that will get conveyed to the superintendent. But I'm still catching up on the budget and the processes, and dealing with the day-to-day problems. But I figure I get a year under my belt, next year I'll have a better breakdown of everything, and I think it'll be a lot clearer for you guys, at least in my area, for facilities.
So I hear a lot throughout a lot of presentations about risks, right? This may happen, that may happen. A lot of times low probability events, even risk, but we bid it in. We have a reserve account that has to come before us to get, to let. In my 4 years, and I don't know, Jay, you've been here longer than me, when's the last time anyone's asked us to tap into a reserve account, that reserve account?
A long time.
So
Jay, do you remember? I don't.
So I think that's another way you can get to a more balanced budget, is to identify all the risks for all of them, put a risk registry together on it, and then manage it through the, management reserve, through a reserve account. Because otherwise you kind of sprinkle conservatism everywhere, and all of a sudden all the costs go up through the roof.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that the budget lines before you have a lot of cushion in them.
No.
They maybe have this much cushion in them. If that, because most of these lines, again, we tried to keep it really tight, because, to your point, if we don't, that's another staff position. And the staff are directly engaging with the kids. That said, we have to have a physically safe place for them to come and learn. So maintaining the facility, making sure that the kids are in warm classrooms in the winter and not in sweltering classrooms when we get our heat waves now, generally speaking, in September, because the seasons seem to have shifted. It's a priority. So in the process of trying to develop this budget, you'll see that the facility lines are really the only lines that increased, because we have priorities to maintain the buildings the best we can with the funding that's available to us, while balancing, trying to prioritize what is the most important staff to attempt to maintain, so that we can continue to meet the needs of the kids post-COVID. We're making headway with academic learning loss. We're not 100% there. I don't know that we'll ever be 100% there. But that's still something that we need to be working on. And the mental health need is significant. Last year, we had 12 mental health crisis hospitalizations requiring home tutoring. So that's for a duration of time. It wasn't had a bad night, I was at the hospital for a day and then I came home. The year before that, it was only 4. It's real. We have kids as young as the elementary school at that level of crisis. They need the support. I can't lose the social workers. I can't.
You
I
need
have
a
to have
building
them.
for the kids to go to school in, though, and Turkey Hill is like a risky building. That thing is scary. You want to talk about scary? Turkey Hill is scary. And
Yeah, it
you-
is, and it's not just scary for the kids, it's scary for the staff too.
But you still need a building to teach in.
Yes.
So I am looking forward to seeing what you're able, and if you need any help, I am very publicly offering my network of people. I am happy to collaborate with you and help you find contractors to get this together, because my children go to these schools, and I want a safe environment for them also, but I see the big task that you have at hand, and I appreciate that you're doing this, so thank you very much. And if I can assist you in any way, shape, or form, I'm here. So please, utilize my services for free.
Has a decision been made on whether to pull school services out of TC Passios, and if there's anything left in Brooks House?
So we're still trying to assess that. The Municipal Building Design Committee, it's been evolving over the last
Yeah.
number of years. Initially, when all of this started with the TC Passios design group, at that time, we really didn't have other available locations in the school buildings to move our programs out or to move all of our offices out. Anticipating a lot of cuts, that's gonna free up space in buildings. So we were looking, is there a possibility to move offices? And the need to move offices really is connected to if we move the ACE program, which is our special education program for 18 to 22-year-olds. That is housed at TCP. To move that program out, because they're 18 to 22, at the time, moving them into the Turkey Hill building because there was one classroom on the second floor that we might have been able to use, not feasible. I can't have 20-year-olds in the bathroom with 9-year-olds. Couldn't do it. However, new principal down at Turkey Hill this year, and she thought potentially the hallway where the kitchen and the cafeteria are, there's a door at the end of that hallway, there's a single bathroom in that corridor. If we could relocate the music room and one other room elsewhere in the building, potentially now the ACE program could be kind of separated out in that area of the building and not throughout the rest of the building with the younger kids. The challenge is the nature of the program and what's needed for the program. It's a life skills, right? The kids are doing laundry, they're cooking, they're learning to cook for themselves. So at TCP, it's not all in one room, but in the building, we have access to a washer dryer, the oven, a refrigerator, they go shopping, right? If we move them down to Turkey Hill, all of those things are gonna need to be in the wing that they would stay in. They can't be roaming through the building to go to the oven or whatever. So we're still exploring whether or not and how much it would cost, and there was a line in here that I put 20,000 in, for any work that we might need to do to set up, to move the ACE program down to Turkey Hill. Plumbing, you know, if we're in a room on the opposite side of the wall where the kitchen is, or near where the bathroom is, if we can access water. So we're looking at that. We also have to look at the ability of the building to support additional load on the electrical panels. So we're in process of that. If I move the ACE program down there, the special ed offices have to be co-located because it is a separate program. And Juliana Hanscom is the administrator for that program. And she has to be co-located with the program. So it's not just, can we figure out the ACE move? I also need to figure out at least that office space move.
So it just sets up a domino effect, right? If that
Exactly.
decision can be made, we can make other decisions on municipal design. Perhaps we don't have to spend capital on TC Passios. You know, again, we got to start making these decisions
Yep.
though, because
Yep.
we can't afford to be heating TC Passios if we're not going to be using it, and so. And it's not for us to, you know, we can advise and we can
Yep.
guide and stuff, but just wondering when that decision was going to be made and if it had yet been made.
So we've got an electrician that's gonna be coming in to dig in a little further to see if the spaces that we're talking about, we can support what we would need to be moving into that space. There's potential for additional offices to be moved as well. Again, it depends on whether or not that load can be supported. And we also need to look at the speed of the network down there, because there'll be more computers, a burden on that load as well, and that building is probably the slowest speed that we have, so we need to assess that situation as well. Doesn't make sense to move offices down there and then they can't, you know, effectively communicate because, you know, the internet keeps dropping them out or what have you. I understand that this is a domino. If we make this move, then there are other things that are impacted, which is why we want to make sure before we say that we can make this move, that we actually can make this move. But it's something that we're looking at. That said, moving extended day and early learning center, that's a separate thing. That's not gonna require, some sort of retrofitting of the building or anything like that. So, and that move we started talking about in an attempt to free up space on the buses and potentially reduce from 11 buses back to, 10 or 10 and a half, and save a little bit of money there. Dee is pushing back based on our total enrollment, because essentially, the policy change, anybody can take the bus now. So they're pushing back and saying they can't do it with less than the 11 buses. That said, we have the transportation forms that will be going out in a matter of a couple of weeks. They're due back May 1st. I'll have real numbers of, students that are looking to be on the bus. At that point, maybe the numbers indicate something different, and I can push back and say that we're gonna reduce the bus. But essentially, if you've got 75 kiddos in the afternoon, leaving Turkey Hill and Primary and hopping on a bus and coming up and getting off at TCP, that's 75 little bodies that won't be on the bus.
Right.
So, we'll see. That's still sort of in process. But I had hoped that we would have been able to reduce that line.
That just drives to square footage needs of our buildings, so it's more than just busing. Busing is one part of it, but
Yeah.
I wanted to
Burnham,
check.
that space that you're talking about, is that what used to be the woodworking shop?
Yes, yep.
Okay. There should be fairly decent electrical infrastructure in there, because, there were all the floor-mounted woodworking tools that you needed for a complete shop in there, but.
Right, we just
again,
need to verify that they weren't rerouted to some other
Right.
part of the building.
Yep.
So regarding paper supplies, paper goods like paper towels, toilet paper, soap. So is that fall under your wheelhouse too?
Yep.
For facilities? So I have dispensers to donate to the school that are brand new and they're commercial grade. So I don't know if that's the same vendor that you use for your school office supplies, like your actual copy, paper, printer, whatever. The area rep in Lunenburg is also an area rep that I work with. I've worked with him for 12 years, so I've done a lot of relationship building there. And I'd like to try to help out and be a little bit more aggressive about saving some money there. I think getting some free dispensers into the school, although it's not gonna go into all 4 buildings because there's not enough of them, it could potentially help with cost for soap, paper towels, and toilet paper. And then are there contracts that you have for those? And I don't know if you have that answer to that question yet, but the longer-term contracts you have on those paper goods, you're looking at maybe a 30% cost savings if you sign a 5-year contract with someone like Kimberly-Clark or, Georgia Pacific.
Yeah, I need to have a conversation with our current vendor. There may be a possibility that we get those dispensers free. It's just a matter of asking for them. So for paper towels and toilet paper dispensers.
So I have obtained hundreds of dispensers for free with a contract to say, I'm gonna buy your product, but then you have some leverage too, because they want your contract for that amount of time.
Yep.
So I do have those dispensers available. I am happy to donate them.
And what's the brand name of them?
I will have to go back. I'm not sure if they're Kimberly-Clark or Georgia Pacific, but they are one or the other. I'm leaning more towards GP, Georgia Pacific.
Let me know, and I can take a look at what we have and make sure they match up.
Okay, they would be very similar to ones that were donated to Turkey Hill last year. But I'll get that information to you by tomorrow.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm really happy to hear that, and I agree, it's going to take you a year to pull all the information together and start to correlate it and get schedules and identify issues and so on and so forth, the way you want it to be. As you were describing the issues that you've been working on and issues you're finding, like on the roof of the middle high school, whichever part of the building that was, that tells me as a former plant manager that nobody's watching, has been watching that equipment up to this point. And I describe it as, oh, we don't even look at it until it stops working. And then we go see what's wrong. Well, by that time, it's probably gonna cost you $25,000 more to fix it because you didn't do something 6 months ago. So I'm happy to hear that hopefully we're gonna bring a program together that's gonna get eyes on this stuff more often and eliminate these major disasters that can happen if you don't catch a bearing that's overheating or whatever. The other thing too, to Chris's point earlier, I actually had written down a note here about a facilities reserve account built into the school budget. And maybe the reserve account that covers the entire town is a way to do it. But, you know, we have, on the town side, you know, that, or actually that money's available to everybody, but we've got millions of dollars in reserve. And some of those reserve accounts, as Chris was saying, that particular reserve account is just for that purpose. So if one of your physical plant systems goes down, boom, it doesn't matter how much it's going to cost to fix it, you need to get it back up and running because you need to get back into the building. So that account can cover for things like that. That was just the feel I got when you were describing what you came into. It just feels, and part of the problem is if you don't have enough staff to do that stuff, then your next step as a manager, and I know you understand this, is that you hire those inspections and preventative maintenance is out. But if you don't have the money for that, then that doesn't get done either. So, thank you.
Yeah, I have full confidence that inside of 2-3 years, facilities are gonna be in very capable hands, budgeted appropriately.
There's a lot to uncover, you know, coming in the door. There's a lot of stuff to look at. A lot of things to understand, you know.
Yeah. And just as an FYI, we had several lightning storms back in August. And we believe there was a lightning strike to the roof of the middle high school because we were having difficulties with the climate control when school opened. And we had 3 different kinds of vendors trying to troubleshoot what all happened there and what needed to be done to get it back online. Not sure if any of what Mr. Heavy's uncovered relative to the units on the roof, if any of that is any way connected back to that lightning strike, versus, to your point, people just not being very attentive to it. And it might be a little bit of both, potentially.
I know
Mr. Heavy will be very attentive, I have no doubt.
I know in the private sector, things like that are covered under your homeowner's insurance. Does the town have any kind of coverage for events like that if you can prove that that's what damaged the equipment?
I don't know the answer to that question, and I don't know that we would have been able to prove that that's what happened. That was the best guess based on what the contractors were looking at in terms of, you know, the damage.
Excuse me.
They couldn't imagine how it would have happened any other way. I don't know that an insurance company would accept that as proof positive that there was a lightning strike. I don't know the answer to that question.
It's just, you know, my feeling is it's one of those things that would be worth pursuing and at least know so you have it in your back pocket. Because then you might look deeper and sooner into, okay, do you find melted wires in a conduit or something like that, which I'm sure Mr. Heavy knows that indicates that you had a huge surge go down that line. So,
Yep.
Thanks.
Mr. Hebe, is there a BMS system for the high school? Because if the high school is 8 years old, those rooftop units, I'm assuming, are 8 years old.
Yes, there is.
Okay, so is there the capacity when there is an outage or electrical issues on the rooftop, there's notifications that are sent out through the BMS?
I don't know that yet, and that's something that I want to have set up. Any power outage that happens, I want to be notified because we had a situation where we did lose power, and come to find out, one of our boilers didn't come back up. So the only way that we were alerted we could tell that the school was cooling down pretty quick. So we researched it, and come to find out, it was just a matter of flipping a breaker. Because when the power came back on, the breaker it has to be reset manually.
Right, on a professional level, like making sure that BMS program for the buildings they manage, I always budget some money in there. And although it may take away from other things, having that prevents those bigger items, of $25,000 or $30,000, so I'm happy to know
Those are some of the
this.
things that I'll be looking at when I dig into each of the schools to get those things set up.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
Just a general question, in terms of superintendency, does the school committee superintendency over the property, or is it over just the building to the edge of the envelope of the building, or does it extend to the end of the property lines
It's the
themselves?
property.
Okay, just for future discussions.
As you're digging into these issues and establishing plans associated with it, are you documenting the plans so that when you retire or leave the district,
He's not
the
leaving.
next
He's never
guy doesn't have to
retiring.
go through the same thing? That's a serious question, though, documentation.
I
of
will
this.
document, yes.
Okay.
So relative to that, I will say that when John Londa retired, he had everything documented. He had it all in a binder. And he had his digital files as well. But with the turnover in between,
Did he leave the binder?
he did.
Okay.
He did. And he had time with his successor, there was some overlap when the replacement started, so that he could transition into the role. But somewhere along the line with other transitions in the last 2 years, we don't know what happened to that binder that had all of the important information in it. So that's why it's taking him longer, because we've got to go search through digital files, lots and lots of digital files, to figure out everything, what had been done, so on and so forth, whether it was a capital plan, a specific project, history on repairs, any number of things. Mr. Heavey and folks in my office have been doing a lot of digging around to get that foundational information for Mr. Heavey to work from.
A lot can happen in 2 years if it's an unmanned operation. So
Right.
I understand the struggle.
The struggle is real.
I was thinking it. Are there any other questions for Mr. Hebe? Thank you very much for coming in and speaking with us. We really appreciate it.
We appreciate
welcome.
that you let us
Public comment.
Oh,
come.
that's right, yes, we'll have that. Sorry, you're not done yet.
Maybe you will.
Is there any public comment from the public this evening before we move on and let them go? Ms. Lockwood?
Well, thank you. I really appreciate hearing Mr. Hebe speak today about facilities. And everything I heard today is, it makes me think and be more reassured that we really need to explore creating redundancy in facilities in town, creating a succession plan for certain very important roads. They're crucial to the town's finances, such as facilities. You know, just the very last item that we spoke about it, when we lost Mr. Londa, he was a great asset to the town and to the schools for so many years. Just the upheaval that we have had since, because there was no succession plan within that small department. More than ever, everything I heard today, you know, so many issues we're dealing, and it's a bigger problem. It's caused by the fact that we are dealing with this very small group, very small number of people working. And, you know, and I have a small business. I have mostly worked in small business, and that is always the problem. And, you know, being able to create something done in a smart way is the best efficiency. We're not talking about saving money in operations. We're talking about being more efficient and not losing, you know, I think Mr. Londa left 3 years ago. Not losing 3 years of, we don't know what's happening on top of our roofs. We don't know, like everything we heard today. By the way, cars, any part of the cars, they rot when they're not used. So also, me, who I actually know a little bit about cars, saying that a drive shaft rotted out, I'm saying that drive shaft was not driven enough. So one thing, my ask here, my question is actually for the Finance Committee, just as the capital plan have talked about meeting in the spring and continue the work, so they're not always talking about, you know, what can you do, 5-year plan. They have a conversation about starting to meet again in the new year. I asked that maybe the budget conversations for next fiscal year starts in August. And these conversations that we're having now, they were having ideas about it, how can we plan, how we can create efficiency. We're not just happening within this month, 2-month period before the warrant closes, before town meeting. We actually start in August and we can start developing some of these plans. Because year after year, I'm seeing these great conversations start and in this 2-month period of budget season. But I actually think that needs to start back in August, and that plan needs to start developing then. So my ask is actually for the Finance Committee to start this budget process with the department heads in August or September. And, you know, with all these great ideas and plans that you guys have talked about it, you know, like Mr. Gray said, yeah, we have a conversation for another day. Well, I think that conversation for another day needs to be in August and start planning that out. I also say that I think Lunenburg has very blessed with a lot of really good, you know, really good people that are volunteering a lot of time. But sometimes we can look outside Lunenburg to see what other towns are doing. And I can tell you, you know, a town that I'm also sort of know a lot of their details is Westford, because I have a business there in Wayland. Westford has had a budget committee since April of last year for their upcoming town meeting. We need to think that these budgets, it's more than a 2-month period, and realize that it's just we're a little bit bigger now, we need better plans, we need more elaborate plans, and so anyway, so that's my ask. I think, honestly, running a small business for Mr. Levy, I'll say that one thing that is that small departments, people that work in small departments, they suffer is that they don't usually have a team, peers they can work with, and, you know, if we are able to consolidate the facilities department, right there, I think it will be a much more satisfying job for both Mr. Levy and Chris Ruth. It's not about who's boss, it's just about being able to do and deliver a good product to the things that they actually do and they believe in it. So that's all. And Evan, thank you so much for adding this time to speak right after the presentations versus waiting for another 2 hours. Thank you.
Every now and then we listen to you, Ms. Lockwood. Thank you for the suggestion.
If I might offer a point
Of course.
of
Go right ahead.
information relative to the truck. If I'm not mistaken, that was a hand-me-down from the DPW, already well rusted. So I can tell you it wasn't due to lack of driving the vehicle. It's past its useful life, quite frankly.
It does speak to not being looked at, though, over a period of time. To anticipate that it's going to fall apart, because they don't rust overnight.
Oh, no, we had pictures for the capital plan. We actually had
Oh,
those
yeah,
pictures a year ago.
Yeah, no, I've seen that. And you are right, that was a hand-me-down to replace one that was even in worse shape.
Yeah. Like I said, it just takes time before it makes its way above the cut line for capital plan. It's, I know that people have talked about having a regular cycle of vehicle replacement so that you don't have vehicles that get to this condition.
It's been an issue that's been discussed, and this has nothing to do with the school department, but, our vehicles, as you saw, even with the condition of that truck, probably when you received it as a replacement, is that we're not maintaining the vehicles to keep them from rusting out in a short period of time. We don't, at best, the answer I've gotten is we've got a garden hose, and once in a while, we might rinse it down. But you park a vehicle that's been out on the road salting for a whole day, and you don't rinse that off ever, that truck's not gonna last.
Right.
No vehicle will last under those conditions.
We've had some conversations about possible adjustments for future truck purchases to minimize the potential for rusting through, so.
And we've compounded that with, now, I'll make this very brief because it's DPW, it's not you guys. But for the last 2 years, we've been using the smaller trucks with sanders, with salt or sanders on them, basically, with straight salt. And I'll almost guarantee that shortens the life of those trucks by at least 5 years. Because again, we never used to have salt on those trucks, except occasionally when we needed to get out in an emergency and spread it with a shovel. So, every shortcoming that we have is costing us 10 times more down the road.
Ms. Lockwood, you have another comment?
Yeah, I don't want to dwell too much on the truck, but I cannot imagine a truck, a sander and a plower for the school that costs $75,000, getting more than 10 times, used 10 times a year. That should be a hand-me-down truck. And if that truck, after it was handed me down to the school, it lasted 5 years, that's good. We're getting more for our money. And that should not be a 75. I mean, we're better off at that point contracting that service out. Because that's a lot of plowing. $75,000, for one truck, we can probably get 10 years of contracted services. It's not about, I understand this. I've worked in small companies, I've worked in larger companies. There is an idea of protecting your budget because the increases you get is from your budget. And the chair of the school committee a couple meetings ago acknowledged that the reason that the benefits is on the side of that, it's on the school budget because the previous superintendent wanted to keep there so that when there was less of an increase than the average, they could use that for other purposes on the school. And that's the thing. The school mission is to educate the children. It is not to manage benefits, it's not to run facilities. And although I understand the concept of protect your budget, I think you're just, at the end of the day, we don't think about this as a town and working together, you are diluting the service you are providing. And the chair of the select board loves to say it over and over and again, how, we don't have a problem with town buildings, we have a problem with the school buildings. And that just highlights, some of the things that we came out here. We really need to sit down and work as a town. We need to figure out how to work together, how to get us the most that we can. in a fair way, that we're honoring our employees, the service they provide, but in the best way. So, please don't, I mean, if I hear about a $75,000 truck that's going to be used 10 times a year, I don't know how financially that actually makes sense to everyone. Anyway, if I don't hear anything else regarding this, I probably won't raise my hand again. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Ms. Lockwood.
We take the plows off, and we do use the truck all year round.
Ms. Lockwood.
And
Last one.
next, what is the use for what do you use the truck year round?
I didn't catch that.
What do you use the truck for outside of plowing?
Grounds maintenance, moving furniture from building to building, supplies that may come in, as an example, during COVID. A lot of things came to TCP and then were distributed out from there, so the heavier trucks were carrying that load. We use the truck all the time.
If that is focusing on not a grassroots issue, good luck with that.
Thank you, Ms. Lockwood. Is there any other public comment from the public? All right. Again, thank you very much both for coming in and
I would just ask if anybody has any specific questions relative to IT, if you could get them to me in the next couple of days. I'll make sure that I touch base with the folks in my IT department to make sure that I have the information that you're looking for. Anything curriculum related, my curriculum director will be with me next week.
Dr. Burnham, it was talked about earlier, but could you kind of ask them to drill down with some information on what it would take to get the phone systems changed over in all the buildings? I understand there's probably some infrastructure stuff that would have to be included if you're going to do it right away, but it would be nice to know what that cost could potentially be. Because my understanding, and I listened only partially the other day, that part of it is fiber optics. And I honestly don't know how expensive it is to install fiber optics, but I think that's the key to the system.
I'll get some information.
Thank you.
When you say a couple of days, do you mean by Monday? Because I missed a couple of meetings, I was on leave, and I have to catch up on the IT presentation, so I've not had an opportunity to watch that yet.
separate IT department.
Not the school IT
No,
department?
the
So did
school
they-
has a completely separate IT department from our IT department.
So I apologize, because I did miss the last two meetings, so I'm not sure if they gave us anything from the school.
Only what we have on their
Okay.
line items so
Okay.
far.
Yeah, it's in my budgets.
All right, so I'll take a look at that, but when is your absolute deadline for that?
End of day Tuesday, maybe?
Oh, perfect. All right.
Is that
thank you
enough
so
time?
much. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
The same IT systems and the same contractors as the other windmill that I've been chasing for 4 years, but
The Kilberg.
All right, I am going to catch up over the weekend.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Now I think
Again,
you're all
thank
set.
you all for adjusting things so that we could have two sessions together.
I look forward to another one next week.
we'll have you back in August too, for the,
I'll be here.
will you?
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you. All right, moving on to old business. I'm happy to skip your revenue expenditures recap discussion until August. Unless you want to bring it up, you want to discuss it, I'm fine.
Are we talking warrant articles or are we gonna skip that?
No, we haven't gotten to that one yet. There are no warrant articles. Oh, yeah, warrant article. Oh, man, we're not done yet. Warrant article discussion. I put it on here, we've received the draft copy of the warrant articles from the town manager. I don't really have anything yet at this point, it's still sort of
Is there
happening.
anything that's kind of out of the, A lot of them seem to be the normal ones.
Exactly.
Yeah, I guess just going through it, is there anything noteworthy that's different than what we tend to see every year?
They are mostly, so far, all the annual articles, recurring articles. There will be an article from the assessors regarding
Yep.
decreasing the age for the low-income senior exemption. And there may be another one that I'll be submitting for exemptions as well, because this is something, I spoke with one of the chairman of the assessors today regarding that this may have to be annually voted on, all the exemptions and their thresholds. It's something hasn't never been done since it was first adopted, but
Say that again, Stephanie?
that every year, all the exemptions should be voted, meaning the veterans applying senior exemptions and their threshold.
As a warrant article? vote?
Yes.
Is that an MGL thing, or is that our bylaw thing?
It's a MGL.
Okay.
The frustrating part of that, these senior discounts, whatever you want to call them, is that the eligibility for any of these programs is a moot point for 99.9% of the seniors in this town. The reduction from 70 to 65, that number's so small because there's only about a dozen to 15 people that are eligible out of all the seniors that we have in town. So it's, everybody's been talking over the years about trying to get help for seniors with abatements from taxes and so on. And unless something changes, there isn't much out there that we can do, that we're allowed to do, that I'm aware of anyway. I'd like to just pass a bylaw or a charter change to discount with criteria, discount senior tax bills by 25%, boom, right across the board, with criteria. I mean, there's other states that have got to be doing this. I still haven't figured out what South Carolina's doing, but everybody in the country is moving to South Carolina when they retire. And you can see it down there. Their senior population is, percentage-wise, is much higher than even we have here for the whole state.
Cost of living, it's less.
Warmer.
You're stuck in South Carolina.
No, I have family there.
I have one question as I scan through these.
What is here?
Letter L, OPEB trust fund. What would be the practical, if we skipped a year of putting $100,000 in OPEB and tried to balance some things out just this one year?
That comes down to a number of things. Bond council looks at that when we're going to go out to borrow. It's an indicator of not good financial health of the town if we're not addressing our liabilities.
Do you think we would
Comes out
really
of free
see?
cash.
Do you think we would really see a bond decrease this one year, a rating?
When we do go out to, when we'll need to go out to get a bond, yes, I went through that process for the last time we did, and there were a number of questions related to that, but specifically OPEB.
That's a reduced amount anyway, isn't it?
It's based on our policy, it's 10% of the prior year's certified free cash, so that number
Oh, okay,
fluctuates
so
as
that's
free
why it
cash
dropped.
fluctuates, and it's coming out of free cash, not out of the tax revenue portion.
Yeah, okay.
On the placeholder for the SAP comp class, that's the one I think I heard about where they were going to readjust that. Is that going to affect next year's budget? I wasn't really clear from when I
Yes.
When-
It will affect this year's budget and next year's budget. They did vote last night, so I do have draft warrant articles for those as well, and you'll be getting that information from the Personnel Committee too, as far as impact. So this year, I'll have to review, obviously, the impact, and that would be coming out of our salary reserve account, and any other possible surplus. We have a large amount in the regular reserve account right now, so, because that was bumped up at the special town meeting.
What is our reserve account at, roughly?
275.
Okay.
So for fiscal '25, it would impact the salary reserve account. That's where it would hit first, that account. And beyond that, then it would be going into the budget.
Okay. For letter E, the $82,119 for network security upgrades for the public schools,
Yes.
if that does not pass, does that fall back onto their budget then?
So I believe, and I not believe, it is on the agenda for Tuesday for discussion of ARPA
Okay.
funding. That is one of the things up for consideration as far as paying for that item out of ARPA, and that would be then a known number and decision before town meeting, and we
So
could
just pass it
remove
over.
that article.
Or just remove it, yeah? Okay,
And then they could reduce their budget by that amount.
right.
What does ARPA have in it, about 160
It
remaining
has,
to be allocated? 165?
How many pennies at the end? I know. What's the current interest?
165, 894, 93.
What's the interest as of today?
Oh, that I don't know.
Okay. Other questions about
Any other articles?
any of the articles so far? I mean, they're
There
relatively
are
straightforward.
two planning
standard.
board articles. You'll get those as well. I'll send them updated draft warrant. One is the water district one that was, they went back to revisit the special town meeting article to make all those necessary changes. And the other one has to do with battery energy storage systems. So
That we're allowed to do them now?
I don't know all the particulars, but it
Wasn't that-
addresses,
Okay.
yeah, because it's not addressed currently in our bylaws.
And Unitil doesn't really like to let people use batteries, from my understanding. Okay, well, that'd be good to know.
I think there's somebody that wants to do something. There's a town.
Oh, like an actual corporation that wants to do
That's
large-scale battery storage?
What I got from listening to them,
Planning board.
getting an open space, it was like somebody who wants to do something, he's trying to get something in place before they apply.
I wonder if that'll trickle down to homes, too.
That, I haven't read it. It's
Okay.
multiple pages.
Shocking.
Yes.
It's very unusual for them.
There was an entity that was looking to do that over on Chase Road a few years ago, wasn't it? In relationship to that
It
system that's already out there?
Sounds familiar,
Yeah.
yes.
I don't know whatever happened to that, it just kind of disappeared, but
It could be the same one
Be
that's,
back.
could be. I'm just surprised they're not fast-tracking it to get in there before it's regulated.
well, town meeting's right around the corner, so.
Yeah, I understand, it's just, from the perspective of zoning regulations and so on and so forth, getting discussed and put into place, a lot of times, a lot of people rush to get in before the drop-dead date to get their application in or whatever, and their grandfather.
Right.
Could you explain a little bit more what Article G is? The transferring or raising a sum of money to defray the charges and expenses of the town for FY '25 and fix the salaries and compensation of all elected officials of the town and any other items included in the budget of the town manager.
That's the omnibus article.
That's just the omnibus, okay. It's just worded in a way that
Yep, that's always the way it's worded.
Is it? Do I just have selective memory when it comes to that budget? Okay. Phew. Okay.
Heather, if you get a chance, if you can pull the email up, it would have been from sometime in the last year or year and a half. I asked a question about the original wording of the article for the Special Purpose Stabilization Fund. And I know Town Council got an answer from you, but either I wasn't copied on it or somehow I never got the answer because I'd like the wording, because we had the discussions back and forth about, what that money can be used for technically based on the wording of the creation of the account. I understand what our practices are.
I included that in the special town meeting, the slides, actually with the actual slides that were presented when it was created, because that was a discussion about the Special Purpose Stabilization Fund at special town meeting.
Okay, which town meeting?
It was this past one, right? But I can pull that and send you.
Okay, I appreciate it. Somehow I
Jen,
missed it.
were you at that one? Were you at the fall?
That's a good question. Was I there?
That was 6 months ago.
Yeah.
That was 5 months ago. I don't even know if I was there. I know you weren't.
I've been going in so many directions in the last year that I don't know where I was yesterday.
Exactly.
So not necessarily on the articles, but related to the budget in general. Can we get an update at one of the upcoming meetings on the Chapter 90?
Oh, is there-
What the plans
I'm
were?
already asking about that.
Oh, okay.
Feel free. We can do it now if you want.
Oh, sorry. And what the plans were to kind of, we heard there was like $1.6 million.
1.9.
1.9 million.
1.9 million.
I can speak generally, and then I can do
Okay.
more formal. So generally, there is about 1.9 million in that account. That also includes, it's either RAP funding or the fair share allotment funding that we received this year. So that bumped up our amount this year from what it would normally, or projecting out. We hadn't been using Chapter 90 for a little bit of period of time when we had the debt exclusion funds, because those were being exhausted to get all those roads done that were on the old pavement management plan. And at that time, so those funds were being used. Then also, I think it was, so in 2023, we exhausted the funds for the debt exclusion in 2022. 2023, we received RAP funding from the state, so that helped pay for some items that are road maintenance related. And we're also working on getting a bridge and culvert inventory plan together, so that should be done by the fall. That was a grant I applied for through the Community Compact, and we hired Beta to do that plan. So that's going to really inform our long-term plan as well. It's most certainly not going to be paid for all by Chapter 90 funds. It will help supplement, I believe, but obviously all the bridges and culverts that we have in town are going to be millions and millions of dollars over time. Another plan that will tie into use of the funds that the DPW director referenced was the sidewalk plan. Our ADA plan was done a few years ago, also by Beta, and that told us what we needed to spend each year. We have a small amount in the budget, it's $30,000, I believe, for that annual amount. We really should be spending more than that, and the director, DPW director, referenced that the other night as far as he does have a contract being put out for this year for sidewalks. We're out of compliance with a lot of our sidewalks and ramps, so that will tie in as well. But there are other uses that we can look at in long-term planning as making sure that we're keeping up with our plan, our 5-year plan for the roads, making sure that we do the same thing we just did, getting an updated plan when that one is a year out to expire, so we keep on this continual cycle. But there's more more needs than there is funding.
So one question I would have related to this is just, the capital, when we were putting the capital plan request together, I don't think we realized that Chapter 90 was at that level. And the cut line was one above something I think that could be used, Chapter 90 funding could be used for. So, the drainage swales at 181 Reservoir. So I do appreciate if we do get that kind of long-term view of it, how we supplement the operating budget and its planned increases, as well as Chapter 90 and other funds for the holistic view. But if there's anything that can be done this year for drainage swales, or I know Bill actually asked for the catch basin cleaning truck. It seems like we need that. And I know that wasn't in this 25 plan, I think it was in 26. But again, if it's, I think there's a couple of things that we could get high value for with having $1.9 million there. Understanding that there's future stuff too, but there is some immediate needs that I'd like to have a conversation about, including even in this, either annual town meeting or a path towards special town meeting funding those.
There's one item that's the sidewalks for the schools that's currently being funded through ARPA that we've talked internally about paying out those out of Chapter 90 instead of ARPA, so that money could go towards the school budget for something that's a one-time expense as well. So those are the things that we're looking at to assist, but that's another use that we just need to confirm about engineering costs for that.
Okay.
Heather, we had a catch basin truck, we don't have it anymore?
They do.
There's catch basin cleaner. You're talking about a back truck?
Maybe.
That's close to $1 million, I think.
The catch basin truck.
I don't have the 26 plan in front of me, but whatever was in the 26.
That could be contracted out though, too.
Yeah, back trucks are expensive to own and expensive to operate.
Are there any other questions?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that was my previous FY25 presentation discussion. That's exactly what I was going to go with. No, that's totally fine. I'm glad you did it, so I didn't have to do it. I texted her, I was like, please don't leave. We don't have any more questions. Are there any other presentations that we've seen, that we've received, that we've gone through, that we want to talk about again, just before we move on to the next ones? Excellent.
I'm just waiting for finalized budgets to look at, instead of floating budgets.
So upcoming presentations, we do have 2 next week, 2 days in a row. That's our biggest one, the last 2 days. So on the 20th, we'll have Money Tech, Administration, Sewer, Unclassified, and Debt Service all together. I did receive, bless you, the presentations for Monty Tech and for Sewer, I believe. I got those, I think today, so I didn't want to overload, so I'll send those out after this meeting. And I also have PAC as well, which will be the day after, on the 21st. So again, if there are any questions you can think of ahead of time, please either send them off to the department head or funnel them through me ahead of time, just so we can get as many answers as we want, or as we need on the day of.
I hope you're letting Pat go first.
He's on the schedule first, yeah. Yes, he did, that was his question. He sent over the presentation, sent over his spreadsheet, at what time can I start? Yes, I'm sure they'll be first. It's listed as first on here. All right, we have some minutes. I haven't forwarded them around. I haven't even read them yet, so if enough people have read through them, I'm fine approving. I don't even know what minutes we have to approve at this point.
I read the February 22nd one today, so I don't know if anyone else has read February 22nd.
My first glance through, I spotted three
I think
things
that
that
was
needed
one
to be
today.
fixed, but I could not find them today, so I'd like to be able to read through that one more time before we approve them.
Okay.
Can we start putting them back in that to be reviewed folder?
Yeah, that's my plan. That's why I don't even know what we're looking at. I've been so...
I have written 3 sets that I would be ready for, but
I've purposefully left Danielle's emails unread so that I can go back to them and actually find them nice and quickly, move them over. I have not had a chance to do it. Yes, I will put those in for our next meeting so we can actually approve some of those. Because I know we're behind by, I think she's got at least 3 at this point, probably. Committee reports. Do we have any committee reports this evening?
yeah, I have one for parks. As town manager said, they did get that OPM. There were 4 submissions for that they will review. But more importantly, they were granted a $1 million grant. So that brings them up to, with ARPA, $2.5 million of secured grant money so far. So that $1 million one was their big one. And they still got a few others that they're chasing, that they will be chasing.
Chris, they've got another big one too, later this year, don't they?
I think there's a $300,000 one that they're chasing, and then there's some private ones for like, I think that, yeah, I may be wrong, but like dog park and stuff like that. But the big one, they just got the big one this week, the $1 million.
Yeah, I thought there was an ADA one that was big too.
Perhaps.
Yeah. I don't know, I've been trying to follow everything at once and it's not happening.
Ms. Lockwood, I see your hand.
Oh, yeah, she can tell us.
The ADA is $200,000. The one that Chris just mentioned was the biggest prize, and along with the ARPA money, those are the big ones.
Thank you.
And congratulations. Any other committee reports?
I just want to say congratulations to all of us. This is an effort.
Yes.
And yes.
I don't have any committee reports myself, so I'm happy to move on. Topics for future meetings, I have a couple notes. But I don't think there's anything we need to get into. We have 2 next week.
Well, for future meetings, right? Yeah.
Yes.
The thing we talked about talking about the consolidation of certain functions, I think that should, after the budgets are done. And the other thing that I had was, and I've heard people talk about our health insurance is great and our health insurance is not great. I had one recently hired employee tell me it's the reason why this employee came to Lunenburg was because of the health insurance plan. So I don't know anything, I know very little about it, so I think maybe sometime after budget to get a presentation of exactly what it is, what exactly it is, and so we can take a look at it and see, so we have at least knowledge of, is this a good plan, a not so good plan, is it overly good, not so, whatever, I don't know. But I think that's something that I know, myself, am lacking the detailed information on.
Yeah, and there are other cheaper options that are
But yeah,
savings
that-
accounts and
Yeah, that could be one thing,
high
but
deductibles.
I can't make that judgment based on not knowing.
I'm sure our Maya rep would love to come by and talk to us at some point.
Yeah,
Oh, no, she left. I had another question for her. One thing that I would like to get into is, at the last select board meeting, the chair mentioned that the town side employees do not have paid maternity leave.
True.
It is 100% true? Because I went through, I could not find it. I know that there are,
Bylaw, and I think there's going to be a warrant article that changes the bylaw.
this year.
Through the personnel committee.
Oh, excellent. Well, then I guess we don't have to talk about that.
Well, we will be talking about.
Well, yes. So that is a topic for a future
Was that
meeting.
both paternity and maternity, or was it just paternity leave they don't have?
Maternity. Not, paternity wasn't even
It
mentioned.
had to do with not being able to use your sick days for maternity leave, and I think the issue was.
I was under the impression that it was like no paid sick leave, no paid maternity leave whatsoever.
So PFML has kind of been a little bit of a relief in that area for maternity leave. I don't really know how that works on the paternity side, but I do know that the PFML Act does pay for that, and it can go up to a 12-week period, so companies.
Right,
The town
I went
doesn't.
and looked into it, there's restrictions on NGOs and on municipal side of things, so there's,
That's your job, I don't think it pays for it.
right.
It allows you the time off.
I'm just glad that
I don't
there's.
know how that works with like municipal jobs. I'd be interested to hear about that, but I know that it does pay for like private leave. Like if
Right.
you leave a
Maybe in the
private
private
company.
sector, but not in the municipal.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what
There's-
I'd be more
Unless
interested
the
to
town-
learn.
We will be hearing about that, I think is that's.
I'm glad to hear that, that's good.
There's a clause where the town was allowed to opt out.
Gotcha, okay. That's coming
We don't
through,
have to pay minimum wage either. And for years, we didn't.
okay.
It would be interesting to know more about that though.
Well, if there's a warrant article coming forward, we absolutely will.
Yeah, it's probably one of the two that you said the personnel is.
Excellent,
Yeah, so at the website,
Yeah.
look it up.
yeah. All right, any other topics for future meetings? Our summer's already filling up. All right, we went over our meetings coming up on Wednesday, the 20th, and on the 21st, on Thursday. So we are doubling up for all those that are desperate to see two meetings. We'll be here twice. The town warrant is still open for another 4 days, until 4 PM. And then our public hearing is scheduled for March 28th. So that will be another long one, possibly. Topic for a future meeting, we need to come up with a report for the warrant. We're gonna need to start talking about that, and we're not gonna have a lot of time, because that is due on April 2nd.
Is that the due date? Because we heard about a due date for warrant articles, which wasn't actually a due date.
For, well, I mean,
For printing, it's early April, it's in that first week of April.
so when I completely dropped the ball on it last year, the due date was roughly the same, but then I was given like a 2-week grace period that I still completely blew right through.
But you were new, so.
I'm gonna claim, I'm gonna
You got
call
a
it.
one-year grant.
How about we do one sentence, it's been a terrible budget year. See you next year.
Thank you too.
I'll double check to make sure what the absolute drop dead by date is, because I think with all the turmoil and whatnot and finalized budgets coming through at the end.
Well, it's 5 days after public hearing,
Exactly.
so I think it's unrealistic.
Well, we don't actually have a meeting between public hearing and when our report is due. So I'll at least ask if we can have after the first meeting in April's date, a couple days after that. Star Wars Day is the town meeting, and the annual election is May 18th.
Are we dressing up?
Absolutely.
I don't see why not.
We having cookies for the public hearing?
May 4th.
Star Wars Day, May 4th.
May the 4th be
May the
with
4th
you.
be, yeah. Oh, yeah, it's gonna be brutal. There will be jokes made. With that, is there any final public comment from the public this evening? Seeing none, any public comment from the committee?
Yeah, I've got a quick one. Jumping off of my comments at the beginning of this budget season, just reflecting on where we are now compared to where we were then and where we're going to end up the week before going into town meeting, or maybe the day before going into town meeting. As I stated back then, that, there were many unknowns then, there are still many unknowns now. There's a lot of shuffling and dodging and you name it, still going on. And at the end of the day, the budget that's presented at town meeting is going to be exactly what I said, the best budget we could possibly bring forward. There's still a lot of motion wrapped up in this, and we need to separate that out as we go into our deliberations and really just focus on what's put before us as final budgets for our recommendations, so on and so forth. As a personal note, as far as I'm concerned, the override has absolutely no chance of passing. And so the budget that we're going to be looking at when the finalized budgets are presented are what I believe is what we'll be voting on at town meeting and what will run the town in 2025. And that's not to say that we're not capable of making adjustments during the year with either an extra town meeting or the normal November special town meeting. But at the end of the day, with my contacts in town, there is no way an override is going to pass. Thank you.
I just wanted to mention that there was a couple of articles in the paper, one in the Sentinel, I think it was Tuesday, and then yesterday, Wednesday, the Boston Globe had an article on, not about Lunenburg, but about the entire state and the issues that they have with Chapter 70, with the schools. And when I was reading the Globe article, it basically mirrored exactly what's happening in Lunenburg. It was talking about the costs, the lack of 70 funds, the cost of transportation, special ed. They went down the list, and I'm going, yep, that's us. So if anybody has a chance to read that article from the Globe or the Sentinel a couple of days earlier, please do so. It'll bring it into perspective as far as this is not our issue, although it is. It is everybody's, almost everybody. Every town is seeing something similar to this. So that's all. That doesn't help, but it makes you feel a little bit better about your town.
One quick comment I left out. I've had occasion to travel from here to Lowell through Groton and 225 to Groton and Route 40 out towards Lowell. And you get a very clear picture as to how the citizens of Groton feel about their override. Both sides of 225 and Route 40 are 80 to 90% no override vote, and a few scattered signs in between that say pass it. So, I agree. There's many towns statewide that are in the same position, but the taxpayers have the same attitude in very many of the towns that, no, you're going to have to live within your means.
A smart man, Dave Rogers, once told me, signs don't vote.
That's right. In addition to talk about the override, I've heard the Lunenburg Water District is looking at a $50 million PFAS treatment plant that could have a potential impact on people's water bills. The Sewer Commission has some expensive maintenance repairs they're doing, and they're talking about a 16% rate increase. So, we've had a reval year where assessments are going up. So people really need to educate themselves and inform themselves on how much they can afford to spend on taxes and utility bills. So you gotta look at all your expenses.
I guess I'll pile on a little on that. If you want solutions on this, the solutions are in Beacon Hill, and it's an election year, so go pressure the people being elected right now. And they have a lot of aggressive goals outside of funding education. So saying you value education is much different than actually putting your money behind it. Again, that's kind of directed at Beacon Hill, because that's our money. They pay a lot in state taxes.
I'll go into the MBTA.
Yeah.
Maybe we can get funding to pave over our beautifully paved roads. It was one of the big bills that they were pushing. Oh, we're gonna fix all the cities that have bad roads. 10 years too late for us.
So the only two things that I have are MMA related.
Mixed martial arts.
Exactly. Not mixed martial arts. I sent it to the committee, but I'm planning to watch it. It is a webinar on March 20th at noon for understanding the formula, or the funding formula for education, Chapter 70. And they're going to do it in an hour and 15 minutes, so
You still won't understand.
good luck to them.
Do you know if that's recorded? Because-
It's all recorded and you can always watch it afterwards.
Okay, great.
Yep.
We have a meeting where they explain it to us here too, that's recorded that you could watch.
And still,
You still won't understand.
Still won't understand it.
and there's another one that's, Chris, you brought this up a couple years ago on digitizing municipal records.
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
That's another one, and we could always add that one, because that's another one your other windmill you've been chasing for a couple of years now.
Actually registered for that one. Is anybody going to the meeting in?
On April 6th?
April 6th, I'm registered for that.
So that is the Association of Town Finance Committees Spring Conference. I went to the fall one, so I'm fine not going to the spring one.
I would love to, but I have a wedding.
Can they reschedule? Yeah, I feel free, go nuts. It's a good time. It's small, but it was informative.
No, come on.
It's in Oxford. It's pretty
Oxford,
dry.
there's gotta be a good place to stay down there.
Money in the budget.
And with that, I would happily entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We don't have to do a roll call vote. All those in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, have a great rest of your Pi Day, and we are adjourned. Thank you.